Hello? Hello?
Welcome to the Township Board of Trustees meeting for Thursday, October 9th. And I would like Mr. Massey to lead us in the pledge. I'm not sure, microphones are working. Mr. Massey?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can anybody hear us over the microphone? Okay.
No?
So,
Mr. Foot?
Did you guys turn yours on? You gotta push
It's
the
on.
button.
yeah, no,
Make sure it's green.
green light's on.
Civilians, check.
We just want to make sure it's recording, though. Is our only concern. You might be able to hear us, but whether or not it's recording. Right.
Just for you, Dave.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Ring, ring, ring-a-ling.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and begin. Before we approve the agenda, I would like to just add a privilege comment under just prior to citizens' comments, and we have with us Bob Foote from McFarland Library and Dave Conklin from Genesee District Library that I'd like them to be able to make a privilege comment. But other than that, if there's a motion to
So
Accept
moved,
motion.
Mr. Chairman, to accept the revised agenda and the addition of the privilege presentation by Mr. Foot and Mr. Conklin.
Support.
Okay, supported. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Chairman, did that include the consent agenda? Is that?
We will do that now. Thank you. I'd like to get approval for a consent agenda.
So move.
Okay.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Did you do the minutes? I don't.
Not yet. I was just getting approval for the consent agenda. Now we'll move into the citizen comments, and with that, I would like to give privilege comment to Mr. Foote and Mr. Conklin.
Thank you for having us up tonight. And what I'm here to talk to you about is the McFarland Library, and we are in need of carpeting for the library. We've been back and forth on it for quite a while on what we're going to do. You received a letter from us with a 5-year plan and thoughts on the carpeting over the last month or so. Kathy, did everybody get that?
I'm not sure. I sent it to Mr. Lehman. I don't know if everybody else got it.
after that, I think.
Okay. We've needed carpeting in the library for a long time, and we've had a couple of additions to the library, which everybody's aware of, the children's area and the storage area in there. We have a new sign that was put up by the Friends of the Library donated that, and it's beautiful. We have a new patio and fence going around that at the library, which turned out very nice, that the library is looking forward to using. The way we've got it set up, it can be opened up so that they can have people sit up on the hill, and they can put a stage in there if they want to. I've got a 10-foot gate in it. That was actually paid for through insurance money of a window that broke that wound up being a $25,000 window if we replaced it. So we decided not to replace it, but we were able to fund that whole project with that. And then the Friends of the Library purchased furniture for it. So we have permanent tables and benches and garbage cans outside. It's going to be a nice addition to the library there. So the children's area, the Blanc Foundation or Community Fund donated $10,000 to the GDL to use as they saw fit for McFarland Library, as long as it went towards the children's area. And with the new children's room there, it was perfect timing. They were able to put new carpeting in there as part of our whole project as we did it. So really what I wanted to talk to you about, I think, is just the amount of money that the carpet's going to cost. We had several bids. We got them from Fogelsonger, Scaffs, Little House of Carpets, and Library Design Associates. And this is in the letter that you received. Fogelsonger's $43,900, $45,600, Scaff $39,800, Little House of Carpet 47.9, library design 77,750 to 94,800. I didn't even really realize what the difference was and why they were so much more, because I thought moving the books and moving the stacks was not a big job, and it is. We've tried to get other people to come in and give us bids to do that. Nobody wants to do it, except for library design. And we tried to get a separate bid from them for just doing that, and it would still be, what was it, Dave, about $37,000, which was part of their original bid. So if you add that to any of the other bids, Fogelsongs or Scaffs, we're back up to the same amount for the different carpets. So the library design, I was at the city council meeting last night at their finance committee meeting, and they would like to move forward in their next budget year, or as soon as their next budget comes up, and use library design associates. The question that came up, we didn't know what the difference was between the low option, medium option, and the high option. We found out that it is really just the basically the colors and the style of carpet. It's all warranted the same and lasts the same. So we can figure that out as we move forward. We also are requesting, the Community Foundation has funds available again, Grand Blanc Community Foundation, and we're going to put a grant into them as well. Wendy Jean Buer said that she would write the grant to them for us and get that going. So we may get funding from them as well. And that was suggested to us just recently. We also have been asking for funding on the website and asking patrons for funds. We have gotten a little bit of money, but not a whole lot for what we need. Like I said, we've needed the carpet for a long time. If you've been in, I know you guys are doing your fire commission meetings in there. You go in, you can see there are a lot of tripping hazards in there. We have holes in the carpet where things have been moved over the years, and we've had to just throw rugs on top of them throughout the library. And so it's a danger, and it does not look good. The children's area looks so fantastic now that we're really pleased with it. So what we're asking is for you to consider using library design, letting us use library design. This is a list of the libraries that they have worked on recently, putting in carpet or relocating things. And I should probably just give you a copy of this, and I can email you this information as well.
Thank you.
And we really feel that they're probably the ones to do it. Nobody will. We had this, David told me that they hired at one library when they were trying to put carpet in, hired 2 men in a truck to come out. They had said they could do it. They wound up having to come in afterwards and hire library design in. The library wound up being shut down for several weeks because of it, and they still had to bring them in to do it. Library design has the equipment and the know-how to do it, because everything has to be moved in the library to do it, and we want to have as little downtime as we can. We're up to, how many, would you say, 150 to or 200,000 people a year now? 200,000 plus per year. And I think in the budget this year that we sent, it did show the different numbers of programs and usage of the library. You know, if you go in, you'll see areas of the library where you can see where, you know, where the carpet's completely faded out, and you can see where the reference books used to be, because they don't have reference books in a library anymore. Those have been moved. The stacks have been moved. The stacks that are in the far end of the main portion of the library, when they were moved, there was carpet underneath them. Library design came in and was able to repair those spots and did a really good job on it. But if you come through, right now the community room that is used several nights a week there for different community functions, they have board meetings in there. They are doing yoga a couple nights a week, parts of the year. They're doing children's yoga in there. And so they're on the floor. The floor looks horrible. It's stained. We've had people in to clean it. There's just nothing we can do anymore. So we are desperately hoping that we can finally get this going, and that you can see to put it in your budget for the upcoming year. Questions?
Yeah, so the city's going to put it in their budget, right? They're not on a calendar year with their budget though, right?
You guys are,
July 1.
I was gonna say they're July 1, so he said it would probably be June that we would shoot for on that, is the way it sounded last night.
Or doing the work, or getting it into their budget?
I think getting into their budget. They want it in the next budget, so
Okay.
they're working on that. And they said your budget is prior to theirs.
Right.
So they'd originally said, let
We're
us know what
approving
they
it
do.
tonight.
And then when I talked to Kathy said, well, let us know what happens with them and what they say. So I let them know that last night. So they did a vote
Right.
on it in committee. It hasn't gone to the council, but their finance
Yeah.
committee is going to push
Okay.
to have it approved.
Because we're getting close to approving our budget either tonight or in the next couple of meetings, but,
So that's why Kathy said
Right.
get here as soon as we could. I had gotten an
Right.
email from her in October that went to my spam
Okay.
folder. I never saw
Okay.
it. So
all right, Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I have a question.
yes,
I'm sort of surprised that this carpeting for the library is just not coming up. So who is your contact person here at the township?
I reached out to them, Mr. Massey, because we were getting into our budget year, and as he said, my initial email to them to say, come on in, went to his spam, and so that's why he's behind.
No, that was not my question.
Oh,
My question to you, sir, is who is your contact person here at the township?
Kathy Lane, normally. And I work with Jeff in the DPW for doing things, maintenance and things that I can get them to do. They do some plowing and that at the library as well. So I'm appointed by the city. So the way the library works is there's 2 city members and there's 3 township members on the board. Pat
Yes, I
DeMarco is from the township,
I understand that.
Craig Withers from.
and Craig Withers and Becky Anderson.
But the reason I'm asking the question is because I have a concern based on you describing the condition of the carpet. Okay, so I'm sort of concerned, why did it procrastinate?
Look back, and if you look back in the records, you'll see I didn't procrastinate. I've been asking for this for at least 6 years, and when the township cut our budget by 5%, I figured it's not the time to ask for money for carpeting, even though I continued to ask for it. So this has been asked continually in the past, but remember, I'm a volunteer. I'm not a politician, and I don't really know what I'm supposed to do with this. So I fall to the people that I know on the board and others to ask questions on it. But I have asked continually to get the carpeting. So
It brings up a good point, and I know, Mr. Massey serves as our person with the fire commission. We probably need to make sure that our appointed people with the library board, that we're meeting with them on a regular basis. Because I know at one time, before I was on the board, if the budget got cut by 5%, it was before I was on the board, because I don't recall cutting it at all.
Well, there was several capital kind of improvements. One we felt with the heating was top of the list, obviously more important than the carpeting, but the carpeting, I have seen that in the past. I don't know how recent was the last time I saw that, but I would like to ask a question through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Laddie. And Mr. Laddie, you tell me if I'm not allowed to ask about this, but I'm regarding the settlement between the GDL and the township regarding the
Chaffee.
Chaffee
Trust.
No, we can't address that. And as I recall, and this is going back a few years, but there was an amount of money that the city and township received that I think was allocated for some of the improvements, maybe even the children's. Well, you guys
Yeah.
used that money for some.
What happened
physical
with that
improvements.
was the money came in, and it came in, we thought it was for us.
Yes.
And the Genesee District Library director at that time was not David Conklin.
Right.
And the check was cashed, and we were never told about it.
But
And
we ended up getting a portion of it, and I think you
You
guys
did,
will
you
utilize
ended up
part of it.
getting a portion of it, and
Yep.
the rest of it stayed with the GDL. and we were able to work out enough to do the improvements that we needed.
Well, the children's
And the
addition.
The
addition.
children's
Okay.
area
The
addition.
and doing the
Yeah.
huge
We ended up
storage
getting the
area.
lion's share of that.
But my question is then, as long as we're allowed to talk about it, the GDL, wasn't that money was supposed to be allocated back to Grand Blanc only, correct? Not for
Right.
general county operation?
Well, the way, and again, we ended up settling this because there was a dispute as to whether or not it was meant, that the donation was meant for the GDL or the library services, or specifically for the McFarland Library. And we ended up working out an agreement with GDL. And
Which
then,
we're
and
very
then we
happy.
also set up a fundraising, highlighted the fundraising ability for just specifically the McFarland Library, that the city holds that account. And so your fundraising efforts for the improvements for the buildings, you guys have an avenue for that now. And then GDL has their own process in fundraising.
So then I would, through the director then, just, has the balance of that been exhausted? Are there funds left in that, state donation?
All those funds were exhausted on improvements to the
Okay.
Grand Blanc Library, so
I-
not only were those additions done,
Yes.
but you can see the new computer desks that were put in there. There you can see the changes in the adult
Signage.
reading area with the signage and things like that. But all of those funds were then spent on Grand Blanc. The projects kind of ran together at the same time.
Well, that's good, because that's what I wanted to find out, if there was any balances there for
And
Mr.
new
Foote, the
furniture in the
director.
children, in the teen room, we have a teen room in there now and that as well. And it was a very good, it worked out very
Yeah.
well.
Mr. Laddie?
And for the new members, the GDL does not supply any building-related repairs, fixtures, anything like that. The city and township are responsible for the physical brick and mortar of the library. And so even whatever their budget is, whatever money they have, it's not, and this is the same way all over the county, it's not usable. We can't use it for physical improvement. So Mr. Foote is coming here and explaining basically what is or isn't available. And so it's gonna have to be a combination of the city and township that decides to.
Maybe we can use their definition of fixture for our fire commission.
Yes, and well, that's been under review for
And you know, one other thing, like I said, our budget was reduced by 5%. And so, because we're on a 60-40 split between the township and the city. And it's not actually a 60-40 split right now because we talked the city into not reducing it by the 5% when you guys reduced it by 5%. So it's not a proportionate thing right now, and Pat DeMarco sent me a thing tonight saying that if the city were to reduce it, we would lose another, I think, $2,500 a year off of our budget. So we'd also ask that that gets moved back up to where it was at least. And the city did suggest last night as well that we ask them, or that they possibly approve in their budget to increase. Give us increased funding so that we can start putting a fund aside for projects within the library, roof, HVAC, you know, for capital expenditures, which we haven't had.
Is there a capital improvement plan at all, Bob?
We have, basically in our plan, we've got right now, our HVAC system is very old, and we have been working with D. Kramer on this right along. We had a couple of big repairs that happened this year, but it was only a couple $1,000s for the repairs. We're paying that much in yearly maintenance fees, you know, for them to come out and do everything every year. But within the next 10 years, we're gonna have to look at doing something with the HVAC at the library. D. Kramer has suggested an outside company. They haven't given us the information yet, but D. Kramer doesn't want to do it. They want to have another company come in and make suggestions on doing everything all at once to figure out how to do it. Because they didn't really change any of the HVAC, I don't believe, for the new addition. So, so they were able to get by with what we've got on that. But they're saying that the stuff is moving towards the end of its life.
All right.
So, but they can still get parts for it and have been repairing it, and it's in good working order right now.
All right. Okay, I think, you know, one thing you can do me a favor and help me get in touch. I know our representative, Craig Withers, is on his way to China right now.
Yes.
Our other representative is teaching this evening.
Yeah.
And I know Pat is the treasurer, and
Pat is.
very good friends
and
with Pat, and she's excellent. She's a township resident.
I texted back and forth with her this evening because Pat has, I'm glad that she stayed on. We are very lucky to have her, and she was about
Yes.
done last year.
Right.
But we brought on Deb Bond, who is, I always thought she was a librarian, but she is the parapro. She runs the library, I guess you'd say, at Indian Hill. And saw her out walking her dog one night by my house and said, how would you like to be on the library board? So we were able to get her on. So we've got another
Right.
person that is intimately involved and is very good. She's helping Pat now when Pat travels with doing the
Right.
stuff that the treasurer does. So
Well, we would like to get together with them, though, so if you can communicate that. Mr. Thomas, you had your hand up?
Mr. Lemata, where in our budget is library?
You look under your public services tab in the general fund,
Got it?
and you go down about a third way down the page, you'll see the
Got it.
contribution.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Lane?
Mr. Foote, did the city give you any idea in this special fund that they are holding? Have they been able to tell you what the balance is so that if you wanted to do anything, you could?
The fundraising fund? Or
Fundraising fund.
fundraising fund,
The
you
one
mean
that,
if the amount of money that's
If
there?
people, right.
There-
If people were, if the, forget about Claffey, but the new fund that was started, that they're holding, if anybody wants to make direct donations to the McFarland Library for the use by your board, did they tell you what balance was in that fund?
I see the checks coming through for that, and there, I would say there can't be more than $300 or $400 that's come for that
Okay.
I've seen. Pat would be better to ask on that, but it's not a large amount. We've gotten a couple checks for $50 and a couple checks for $100, but it's the same thing. Like when we ask for, you donated a bench at one point, and so we've asked for different things like that from people. But the Friends of the Library, who they make their money by doing the book sales, that money all comes back to us as well. They just purchased all the furniture for outside. They've done a lot of that. They purchased a new circulation desk a few years ago, and that all through the book sale. And that again is all volunteers that do that. But they don't normally do anything for building or that. So them purchasing the furniture was different for their group.
Good, thank you.
all right. I think we've got enough information, and we will get back with you then.
Very good. Thank
Okay.
you very
Thank
much.
you, Mr. Foote.
Thank you
And
for being a
Thank you, Mr.
great
Conklin.
volunteer.
I appreciate it. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, have a
So,
good evening, and thanks for your work.
And thank
hopefully
you
we
for
have somebody
staying
that's gonna shovel
on.
and plow tomorrow if we need it. So
We're not planning on needing any plowing.
it was so hard when I walked it. So.
That's going to go away. Thank you for your time. With that, we'll open it to the public for comment, and we'll start on the left side of my room. Mr. Russian, good evening.
George Russian, 2441 Valley Lane Drive. I appreciate what you people did for me to let me talk to Mr. Laddie to clarify up the sewer situation. But I still have a few things that we talked about, like where my friend Jeff Wright from the county is responsible for our sewers bills to go up. And what I'm confused at is we're paying a flat fee of $82.29 for just a county sewer, but yet the people with meters in the township are paying $26.75. So there's a difference of what, $55.54, which is confusing to me that the county can keep raising our sewer bill, but yet they don't raise the sewer bill with people with meter. And Mr. Laddie also said that he raised at rate about 300%, which is quite excessive, 300% for the people with sewers. So I'm just wondering if it would be feasible for you people to ask Mr. Laddie to talk to a lawyer and see if they can do something about the situation where Jeff Wright and the county raised our sewer bill, like he said, about 300%. So I don't know if you want to go along with that, or if Mr. Laddie feels that would be a pretty good idea to go in front of a judge and explain the situation. So that's the situation on the sewer. Well, one other thing is, I mentioned about homestead exemption for seniors 62 or older, and it's up to the township because it is the state put it in, and excuse me, it's up to you people to say. Which I'm thinking of, if they would lower the seniors 62 or older, which you have, like I said, you have senior widows and widowers, where only one person on that have a well. If you would drop their down to, say, from $119 down to $90, and then see, Mr. Laddie said, well, we got to find somewhere else to make up the difference, which is true. So I don't know if you'd have the money in the general fund to take care of it, because that, or what I'm looking at is take the people that are on the sewer, if you lower their bill down to $90, what they would pay for the whole year or month or monthly, and then take the people that are on a meter and divide all those people into what the few people are on sewer or on with the well, and see how much you'd have to raise their
bill to rate
their
to cover
bills.
it. We're going on about 4 minutes now, Mr.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So, thank you very much, Mr. Russian, and we appreciate
welcome.
your concern,
Can I sit
okay?
over?
Sit wherever you'd like, sure, anywhere there. We'll continue to the back of the room. Mr. Ert? Go ahead. We'll go to this side of the room. Good evening.
Good evening. I'll be brief. I'm Dennis Keyworth, 1387 Norfolk Avenue in Concord Green Subdivision.
Welcome.
Thank you. I would like to speak briefly on the road construction that was done in Concord Green. It's completed now, and I'm pretty satisfied with it. I know there's some people complaining, but
Okay.
what I wanted to mention is I was talking to the project manager during the course of the project, and he said that the Genesee County has been given a grant for that project, plus several other projects in the county. The criteria for this grant was it has to be shovel-ready project, and they have to be able to complete it in this season. Now, this brings a lot of questions to my mind. First off, is this a grant? I don't know. It's kind of hearsay, but the way the manager kind of lays this all together, he is not working for the road commission. He works for Wade Trim Engineering. They were given this contract because this grant contained 9 projects and is more than the county can handle. So one of the questions come to my mind, obviously, is this a valid grant? And the other thing is, if it is a grant, is the money earmarked for individual projects, or is it just going into some general road maintenance fund? And if it's an individual project, obviously it would be to the benefit of the homeowners. Otherwise, who knows where the money goes? This project, estimated for just this Concord Green project, is $500,000. I think it kind of warrants some investigation. And I'd like to ask the board, or the township, just to inquire. I'm sure you've got contact with the road commission and these people, and just see if this is good information or not.
And we have a lot of other projects we'd like them to give grant money for too, if it's a grant, but.
Yeah, well, I don't know where the grant
Yeah.
come from. I honestly think this guy told me something he wasn't supposed to tell me. But it's, like I said, it's a significant amount of money, and I think
if
it
it
would
was-
warrant some investigation.
We'll look into it.
Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Lane?
I think that the gentleman indicated that this grant was to be used for projects this year, and so if it is a valid concern,
Well, I'm confused because my thought was that the road was paid for by the residents, so if somebody's getting a grant, then why are people paying money? But
well, that
we'll
would
we'll
be the
check into it
question.
and find out. Mr. Limita will go with Mr. Sears, I'm sure, and Mr. Laddie, and see where
The road commission
Or
got the
that,
grant supposedly.
Yeah.
I don't believe there was a grant offered on that, any of that. If it was Wade Trim, there may have been something in the engineering portion, which is what the county donates towards
Okay.
the cost of the project. So if it was, the county would donate the cost of the engineering construction management as their portion of the project. And if they got a grant to that, it was probably to cover their portion of the project, not the overall construction project. We'll get an answer back.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comment?
Mr. Ertz?
Good evening, Mr. Ert.
It's
You
not
get tomorrow
working
night
tonight.
off. No meetings tomorrow night.
No meeting tomorrow, that's great. Oh, speaking of meetings, I was able to make the city meeting last night. And I wish our library board was still here because there was no presentation for the library at that meeting. I don't know what, anyhows, the mayor did bring up later on in that meeting, and I'm doing this from memory because I didn't take notes on that, but they did mention that there were 3 options for carpeting, and you know, me sitting out in the audience, I got to listen to this stuff and try to digest it, and there were 3 levels of carpeting go in there. Well, most of the cost, and I don't have this in front of me, I guess was moving the books. So if you're going to do that, put in the higher grade carpeting, because if the cost is moving all the shelves and everything. And this is my comment on it. But there was no presentation on that last night there. And the mayor's comment that she made was in regards to the quality of the carpet. And they will be waiting on the township's decision on what to do. So that was her comment.
Okay.
So that's a couple of minutes that I wasn't planning on talking about. I'd like to talk about the fire department, okay? I was just curious of whatever happened with the kitchen. Did the city ever pay for it? If they plan on not doing it, anyhow, question. I understand there's a ventilation system on the budget for the fire department. And my understanding is that the commission or partnership paid for the ventilation system in 2. Commission is 86% paid by the township. If we put a ventilation system in Station 1, that means we pay 86% of that one too. So for every dollar the commission spends, 86% of it is ours, but we're putting it into another building. Do I really believe that the commission owns that piece of equipment once it's installed and all that stuff? Probably the city thinks they own 100% of that. Do we think we own 100% of our ventilation system? It's just food for thought. Well, you know, it's a weird situation. So, I just want to bring that to your attention that that came up. Reason I say that is, I want to quote a trustee that we have on this board. We get ourselves on a slippery slope. We don't want to be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ert. Any other comment?
I push my luck to try to get up for 3 more minutes.
Yeah, you're pushing your luck. Sorry. You got 3 minutes. Sorry. Come back. We've got a meeting towards the end of the month. You're welcome. Okay? I'm sorry, Mr. Russian, but we've got a full agenda for this evening.
No problem.
Okay? And we appreciate your concern and coming to us, though. Okay? With that, we're going to move on to the approval of the minutes. We can entertain a motion for each of them individually or all 5 sets of the minutes. Is it 5? Yeah, 5 of them. So, Mr. Massey, is your motion to approve all 5?
All 5.
Support. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Approved our consent agenda. Going down to zoning issues. The board will consider an application to amend the Sam's Club Planned Unit Development Agreement to allow the addition of a fueling facility to complement the existing retail store. We had discussion on this on Tuesday. We discussed moving it to the Planning Commission for their consideration. Do we have any further discussion on the item? Mr. Limita?
I did want to point out that Jill Bain was here also from Giffords Webster, and she'd be available to answer any questions on both of your next two zoning issue topics.
Ms. Bain, welcome. I've got a few questions, actually. I don't know if anybody else will, but. Good evening.
Good evening. Nice to see you.
So, the Planning Commission, if they look into this, they'll be reopening the PUD and taking a look and seeing if, could there be other changes that could be made at the same time? I know, you know, one of the issues is the truck parking in the parking lot at Walmart. Maybe that could be addressed.
That is something that should be addressed. And I
Okay.
think it's in the agreement originally.
Okay.
But maybe they need to be reminded about that.
Okay. The entryway at the entrance nearest to where this planned station would be also, I think, there's an island. I don't know if anybody's noticed that, but it's only this high, and you can see all the scrapes from cars running into it, especially on a night. I don't know if it's snowing tonight, but whenever there's snowfall, that thing gets hidden and people run into it because it's very hard to see. But there's also a lighting issue at both entrances, that if you're
On Dort Highway.
if you're driving down Dort
I agree with
Highway
you. Yeah.
and it's raining or snowing or late at night, you can't, it creates, I think, an issue because, you know, you search for that entrance going along Dort Highway. So those are a couple of things I know of that, but anybody have any questions for Jill on this?
I have
Yeah, Ms.
another.
Lane?
I have another concern. I went and drove it last night, and they're talking about a triangular area where they're thinking of putting this fueling station, and we're sending it back because we consider it a major
Correct.
proposed amendment that you do not have to accept. And when I was looking for this triangular area, the only triangular area was the green space by Cece's, and I'm going, what? I'm not giving up landscaping for
Yeah, I
anything. So
don't know that it's landscaped. I think it's just undeveloped. And
it's
next
grass.
to- It's grass.
That's landscaping, green space in that area. So, I mean, I'm not interested in losing any grass, even if you consider it undeveloped. I don't. I consider it an improvement. So I went looking last night, and that's my concern.
Okay. Mr. Guzak?
Is it directly behind CC's?
No.
I think it's to the,
East.
just to the, to the
East
east.
of it.
Just east of it?
On
Actually,
the
I've
opposite
got
side
a,
of-
the
It
printout of
seems
right
as
here.
though it
Because
would
the
be
printout I
difficult
saw
to
was so
see.
hard to see, because I've been
I
there
think
lots
it's
of
hard to
times, and
see.
I didn't see enough lane to do anything. So I thought it was, you know, south of the whole complex,
No.
back
No.
in there. But I
It's
can
not
find
too
it
far
on
off
the
of
map,
the
so.
entrance, but it's, I think, easier to see if you're coming
Where's
south on Dort
CC's
than
at?
going north.
Right there.
Oh, okay, well,
There's-
it's right next to
Adjacent
the
to-
parking lot then.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
it's
very good.
between
I
the,
figured it was back in here. because
between the
back here
driveway
was-
and the
okay.
parking lot.
Yeah.
All right.
And so we have some general questions in addition to the ones that you've raised about internal traffic and circulation on the site. They've made some changes over the years, and we're concerned about some of those things. And this certainly will have an impact on that. So we will be asking them to do a study to talk about.
One of the things that I know, having served on the Planning Commission for a few years, the you know, gas stations are never a popular item for some people, but I think to reassure our board, we don't set the regulations when it comes to gas stations
The,
and
the environmental regulations.
and the tanks and those types of things. Those are all state and federal
They are.
guidelines that are followed, right?
They
And
are.
there's people at the state and federal level that ensure that those guidelines are followed.
Yes. And we did have, as you may recall, two proposals, well, three. Two of them were from the same company, and then the third one last year. And there was a difference in the way those were received by the nearby residents. And that was related to the way that they were presented and the way that the applicants dealt with the concerns that the neighbors had. And I think that we would encourage the folks at SAM's to follow that model of working with the neighbors and understanding their concerns if there are people that come out for the public hearing, to identify those and be prepared to answer the questions that they will ask And the environmental concerns are good questions to ask, and they can be answered by the applicant and their
Right.
engineers.
Okay. Ms. Lane?
But I want to clarify for you, this is not a rezoning when you're talking about
Yeah,
putting.
I realize that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because when we initially improved it, we did not want gas stations in there, so I just wanted to make sure.
That's a PUD, so.
Right, and it is, it's
Yeah.
in the agreement, and it's noted in there twice. It's specifically an excluded use.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I just wasn't sure, just making sure.
Yeah,
While
no
we
more
had
of that.
Jill here.
Yeah, and I did find some communication back when this was originally being discussed about certain uses being listed as permitted, and obviously if it's not listed as permitted, it's not permitted. But these were specifically excluded, so it was like an additional.
And I'm sure there's
But that was 13 years ago, so.
And we probably have a few of the members that were on the planning commission back. Mr. Kent?
Through you again, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Laddie, what is the weight of that's not a permitted, or it was excluded?
Well, and I'm glad you asked that. And Giffords Webster hit on this in the report. The request to add what is specifically excluded in the original agreement is definitely a major change. And so I think what you're doing tonight is you're recognizing that request as a major change, and you're not saying that you're agreeing to it. I would think that the planning commission and initially, and then you secondarily, will want to give a significant amount of weight to the fact that that was an excluded use. And as Ms. Boehm just pointed out, typically you'll find permitted uses, and then what's not permitted is excluded. Well, this is like a bright line exclusion, and it'll be interesting to hear the collective memory of those that were involved in the process and the consideration of documents that Ms. Boehm pointed out that highlighted that exclusion. And it'll be a quite interesting debate, I would think.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
And it's up to the applicant then to also illustrate to your satisfaction and the planning commission's satisfaction that whatever concerns there might be with this use, that they can be mitigated and offset through other improvements on the site. That may be something that that we can all work through together.
Okay.
Chair.
Mr. Massey and then Mr. Guzak.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. At what point will the final layout drawings be submitted?
That will be likely after they go through the public hearing for the PUD. So they have to get permission to be able to do this, then they'll present their site plans and we'll work through site plan issues with them.
Okay.
They'll have a conceptual site plan though.
I have a follow-up question.
Okay. Go ahead.
So, when they present the final drawing, so that will take care of the
Ms. Lane.
cheers?
Yes, we will talk about lighting, we will talk about landscaping, we will talk about traffic and parking on the site.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, a couple questions. One on the lighting. Of course, the lighting where the facility is quite a ways back from Dort Highway, and I think we're speaking about the one that's on
Entry
Dort
lighting.
Highway. Even though it's that far back, we do have a right to say we want more light out there.
I think it's appropriate to say that we find that the lighting at the entry is deficient.
Right.
And that seems like something that's very reasonable, and it's an entry to this facility, so it's very related to
Right. And
that
I'm just
proposal.
curious because I don't know why they wouldn't have had better lights to begin with.
And they may
because-
propose that anyway, because now this entrance is going to be significant for their gas station.
But
Especially
I
because
use
it
both
really won't be that
entrances, and
visible from
I've
coming
seen
north.
just as much traffic on Dort Highway as Saginaw Street, so it seems that it should have been in the original one, the light should have been there all along. But that was my first question. So
Yeah.
evidently, we can look at it again, and we've got the right
have the
to put lights
opportunity
in
to do that at
get it
this
back
point, right.
safely.
Joe wasn't our planner back then, so.
Right, well, that's fine. And then the other question was, I know it indicated in there's certain things were restricted, which of course were gas stations, and it also said car repair places and things like that. And it's kind of curious that Walmart has a car repair place in their building, so somehow they allowed that to happen? Or was it just other outside ones? Because there is a
I
repair.
think it was other outside ones. I think that there were some special considerations for the large retailers that were coming in.
So there is a
Facility.
spot
They all
in there that
came at
allowed-
once, I believe.
Sam's Club has it too.
Yeah.
So there was a spot in there that allowed them to have it, right? And just exclude the other people out?
I think so, but I can go back and check if that's something that you're
Well, that
interested
must
in.
be, because otherwise
Yeah.
you would have found
Yeah,
it.
I
I would just,
Yeah.
I didn't go through the whole thing, and I knew you'd know, so.
And I brought up too that, the drive-through wasn't allowed
Right.
either, and we put the drive-through in
Changed that.
Panera.
You allowed it.
Any other concerns or questions?
I was on the township board when this was addressed, and we spent as a board having differences of opinion at the meeting before we agreed to that PUD. It wasn't just the planning commission. We didn't just accept their recommendations, and we discussed strongly what we did not want, because that was taking that 80 acres of Deer Park and making a significant change, and we had been through years of fighting for rezoning for Kmart and a whole lot of other things that we felt were inappropriate for the township. So I want this board to know that the planning commission can look it over and garner information, but when it comes here, we're looking at every single letter, and we can decide and argue and disagree, because that's what we did the first time, because we wanted a quality development in that area in the township, and we had fought for years to stop so that we wouldn't have vacant Kmart stores and other things, so.
And I know
just-
too that Rod Arroyo is still involved with this, and he was very involved in that review of that entire PUD and those other site plans.
Excellent.
And he does talk about the enhancements that he was able, and you all were
Right.
able to get Walmart
Right.
to agree to in terms of the design.
Right.
And how that really, this Walmart here became sort of the model for that
Absolutely.
better looking Walmart that we've seen in other communities. So it started here. You had the first nice one.
And it,
We take some pride in that.
when it opens back up, we can use it to enhance it even further.
Chairman
Yeah,
Bennett,
Mr. Mansur?
I'd like to make a motion that the board refer this issue
Thank you.
to the planning commission as for with the intention of a major redo of the planned unit development.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next item. Board will consider a motion to approve the planning commission recommendation to amend the zoning ordinance on medical marijuana dispensaries in the healthcare district, section 3.1.12, as well as remove related standards in section 4.77, consistent with the board action to opt out of the new state law regarding such issues.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that the board accept the recommendation of the planning commission.
Or,
Okay, any discussion? Ms. Boehm, any input on
It's
that?
pretty straightforward, no.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
thank you for coming out, Jill.
Under operational issues, the board will consider a motion to approve the superintendent's recommendation of entering into an agreement with Bodman Law to represent the township in workplace employment law matters. I'm sorry, am I looking at?
Future positioning?
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm
the
sorry.
future
I'm
position
sorry,
at
I
the
missed.
bottom, if you
Sorry
recall,
about
the
that.
board asked me to revise and
Okay.
since Director Zostak was gonna be here this evening.
So future positioning is the next item on the agenda. I apologize for missing that. The board will review the fiscal year 2018 proposed budget. With that, Ms. Sostak, do you have anything you want to present or discuss? Mr.
have a
Massey, do you have a question?
I have a question, Mr. Chair, for
Okay.
for the Director Kathy. My question, do you foresee any more changes to the budget before it's approved?
Not unless we get direction from the board to change something. Other than that, we don't anticipate any.
Okay.
With regard to the presentation from the library this evening, I'm wondering, we haven't voted to do anything on that, yet. And I don't know that we will, but, I mean, that'll be up to our board to decide. But we have to have this approved by December,
By the end of December 31st, but your last meeting in December is,
right, the 15th or
Yeah.
something like that. So, if we were gonna make any changes, it would need to be fairly quick.
So I think it's a good point, and we have allocated $47,500 towards the McFarland Library. That's the same amount that we have allocated from 15, 16, 17, and going into 18. I don't know when the 5% was before my time, so I don't know when that actually occurred. So that has been a static amount for at least several years. And with the request about the carpeting, we can provide funding for that carpeting. If the board wishes to direct us to do so, the money would come from the Capital Projects Fund, and we would have to appropriate over for the library. And since we are part owners of the building, I mean, we're just putting capital funding. I know their estimates were somewhere with their recommendation between 77 and 94,000. They're talking about grants. They're talking about the city's participation. I don't know exactly what dollar amount that they were expecting from us, to be honest with you. And if the board would like to make that, ask us to make that recommendation to make that change, we certainly can do it. Just to give us an idea of the dollar amount, if you want to allocate $50,000, $60,000, or where the board's idea is on that.
Yes, Mr. Kent?
Yes, and a question, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Mr. Lemita. Holy cow, I'll get it right.
That was easy.
I just got able to talk starting Tuesday. Anyway, I know you guys will wish that still continued to tonight, but anyway, do we have to put a dollar amount on it, or can we just conceptually approve that we are going to allocate within that range and less any grants or whatever changes, that they are able to do it? Or do we have to specifically set a dollar amount? Can't we just agree that we will, at the time, it's not gonna be till next summer anyway, July 1st at the earliest, based on what the city said, if we agree to that, and it would take it, we would just say that that's where the money is gonna come from, and we'd make a budget amendment at that time from the CIP.
Because the dollar amount may
We
change.
would just, in agreement tonight, that we agree that, I mean, if you've been in the building, you know that everything Mr. Foote said is correct. It's been that way for a long time. But the 5% thing, I would like to find out when that happened also, because I don't recall a reduction in it. I don't remember that. I mean, it could have been referring to, and Kathy and Earl would have to maybe chime in on that, but in 8 and 9, I wasn't back on this board. And that was, in 10, when I came on, we had to, we cut $1 million out of the expense budget. That was when the revenue had just started hitting us from the decrease in property values. Maybe that's when that 5% is still ringing a bell down there at the city. I don't know, but I don't recall it after we got everything calmed down, 10 or 11. I don't recall a reduction in them budgets since.
Yeah, it wasn't. It'd have to be between 8 and 10, and there were some reductions. It seems like there could have been. I think there's reductions in Parks and Rec too. I think there were cuts.
Yeah,
in
everybody.
quite a few
Did.
spots.
We did every department. I know we did.
Right, and so it would have to be between 8 and 10, because I think you're right. It was probably getting 8.
Well, how about if we did this? What if we have a consensus of our board that feels as though we do want to look at how we fund that?
Yeah.
That we give Dennis that directive, and he can take a look at the funding, look at the 5% where that changed. We have another meeting before we have to approve our current budget and see how that changes our capital expenditures. I mean, we don't have to necessarily. I mean, do we have a consensus? I'm not sure, but.
I absolutely concur.
Okay, Mr. Mansour?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that we ought to ask Mr. Lemita to make a line item in there just so for planning purposes, we know we're going to reserve a certain amount. And if it's plus or minus, that's okay, but at least there's something in there that looks like we're serious about this. And I would agree that we should find a way to fund a portion of that.
So do we have a consensus, or does anybody object? Mr. Lemita?
And one of the things I want to point out, and we need to make sure the library understands this, you could hear the frustration in Mr. Foote's voice about having asking for this for a number of years. But that request has never come to the township. I've been here for 2 years and it's never been requested. It's not in our CIP. We didn't allocate any funds towards it because we never got a request from them. So I think we've got to figure out a better way to make sure that when they're trying to do their capital planning, and I appreciate they sent that letter along now, like here's our 5-year capital plan. But if they start to work with us ahead of time saying, we may need something, or here's our 5-year plan, and they send it to us every year during our budget process so that we could, we can take a look at it and see if it, if it's something that we can support.
Just a follow-up comment. There's not been a piece of paper that came to us and said here, but back when really what started all that was when that donation from the estate, they had a list of items. Carpet was in that list, I remember it. Obviously, the HVAC, the heating thing was top, and that's what we said, okay, start with that. And then, of course, they did the other items that you heard them talk about with that money.
Right.
But I haven't seen any piece of paper of any items, capital improvements since then.
Well, I'm going to make it a goal of ours to get together with our representatives on that library board and take a look at, just like we do with our fire commission people or any other commission, we need to do that probably with our Parks and Rec Commission members too.
Right.
We have Mr. Thomas who serves on the parks, but we also have another individual, and we need to make sure that they're involved with, where our board sees a direction going and find out where their direction is as well. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Bennett, you've already said it, and I will concur. I think some of our things like the Perry House, the McFarland Library especially, because I know about them because of my service on the GDL, but some of those outlining groups have never, Mr. Lehman is new, so he wouldn't know how, that some of those things were out there because he doesn't hear about them. But we know about them, and when you're talking about what's happening in the community, we need to reach out and educate them how to do it, because you even heard at the fire commission level that the city representatives didn't know how, that they were supposed to go to the city and tell them, and we can encourage our fire commission to do more of the same thing so that people are more involved.
Okay. Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, I just wanted to check with Mr. Limita. You will look at the 60-40 split to see what it actually is, to see what portion is the city and what portion is ours. Because I know he said it was 60-40, but now he's saying it's not. And I think that's part of the 5% you're looking at. But so that way, we're assuming that if the city says they're going to do it, let's say it's 60-40, they're going to come up with 40%, and we're going to come up with 60. That's the thought on it, right?
And based on what Mr. Foote had reported, it looks like what he's saying is that we had dropped ours by 5%. The city never did drop theirs by 5%. We'll take a look and research that because, we can pull information, we'll check the budget, we'll look at the split, and maybe we can make that recommendation back to the board for that 5%. We can restore that 5%, as well as Director Sostak can also make a line item like Trustee Mansour suggested, and we can put something in there towards that carpet. We'll do a change to the capital improvements plan and put some money from the capital projects fund in there so that we've earmarked it. We don't have to have an exact dollar amount. We can work that through, see what the grant is. We can always make the budget amendment for next year, but at least we have it in there for fiscal year 18.
Right, I understand that. My question is it going to be a 60-40 split? Is that what we think it's going to be?
It can be whatever you want it to be.
Is it written somewhere that it's 60-40?
Well, that's my question, because, because I'm just trying to figure out, if it's supposed to be 60-40, and if you do the other adjustments, but this is a new project, so it should be 60-40.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I wanted you to make sure, because all of a sudden,
60-40.
it could be 90-10 or whatever.
60-40 on the total contributions and 60-40 on the carpet, less any grants that come through.
Right, and you're going to check all that, right?
Sure.
Let's look at the organizing document too, and just see if those need to be cleaned up at the same time too.
And I'll work with David on that.
Okay. All right, Mr. Massey?
Sure. I think based on what I heard from the clerk, if I heard it correctly, is that we don't have a protocol for how information should come to the township.
Good point.
That's what I'm saying.
It seems like we need to put something in place immediately. Who are the contact who the contact persons are here at the township. Because it seems like it just at random. John Doe can be a contact person. And if the information doesn't get to John Doe, or John Doe decides not to forward the information, then they are holding the supervisor responsible. They are holding the superintendent responsible. So we need something, we need some clear marching orders here.
That's a very good point, Mr. Massey. I think, one of the things that it points to is we have our board representatives to these commissions, but we need to have a more formal relationship with our appointed individuals or appointed residents that serve on those commissions. So I'll go with Mr. Limita, and we'll figure out, maybe we have a policy that as a board that we would like them to report to our board on a regular basis, whether it's annually or every 6 months, what have you. But in addition to having our board members give a report, we need to have it be a two-way communication with whoever. That might not be a board meeting, it might be a sit-down work session with the other commission members from, whether it's fire, parks and rec, library. Mr. Kent?
It had to happen after 11 because the budget was 50,000 in 2011. I just happened to go through some of my archives here. And so that $2,500 came off sometime
After 2011.
2011.
Okay.
I don't remember doing that, though.
I think it was because we were having to manage everything so tightly.
Yeah, but the biggest cuts.
Okay, we ready to move on?
So I'm surprised.
Done by then.
Other
No, aren't we
questions, Jim?
talking more about the budget?
Well, I meant move on from the library to talk
Oh,
about the budget.
okay.
Yes.
Anything else on the budget that anybody wants to raise? Ms. Lane?
Mr. Limita and I had a discussion weeks ago, and you developed at least the 2019 expenses for the Perry House, Ms. Sostak. And have you decided, Mr. Limita, you and the finance director, as to if you are willing to put in a line item for the Perry House? And you suggested putting it in the same area as Parks and Rec. I just wanted to know if we were going to put in there at least all of the set expenses, like the mowing and the utilities and those definitive costs, and then decide what we had that we could put in if we were going to do anything else. That's another part of the budget that hasn't been addressed.
And so that's something that we can do. The last time we mentioned it, like I said, the board can direct us to do whatever they'd like us to do when it comes to the Perry House. I think it is a good idea to put something from Perry House expenditures. The sheet that I gave you showed through October 13th of 2017 expenditures roughly of $8,213. Portion of that the Owens Tree Service bill for $4,362 will actually be coming out of the tree protection ordinance fund. So I mean, some of that is misleading, but it's still a $4,000 expenditure so far this year at the Perry House that I think it would behoove us to keep separate under Perry House, and then I think we just need to allocate a budget towards it. Right now, these things happen, whether it be the gas, electric, the water that we pay the city, roof repairs, they come out of the
Yeah. general
fund budget, but they just get lumped into either building and grounds or,
I would like to keep separate the I don't know how to term this, but the ongoing expenses of the Perry House. I'd like to keep that separate from any capital expenditures. So if we're putting money towards kitchen or things like that, I
Well,
think.
it should be everything. I think it
Yeah.
should be everything.
But I think, keeping separate the capital
absolutely.
expenditures, because otherwise
Yeah.
it looks like, why did we cut it the following year? And it was
Right.
actually, we put in $10,000 for
Yeah.
a kitchen this year, so.
I agree with you on that, because the other thing that they are going to come looking for is additional capital expenditures, and two that are going to be very costly, in my opinion, are securing that barn for the safety of the public and handling that trail that's in there that is not according to, and those should be the two higher priorities than some of the
Well,
other
parking
things.
lot, parking lot as
Well,
well.
Parking lot.
But
Which-
until you get the barn down, you can't do the parking lot.
Well,
And so I want to keep those things, I want the line item for the general operations and everything, but then I want to start seeing, so that everybody, the historic commission and this board, see what the actual costs are, because they've never been broken out.
Right.
They've had to hunt and peck for where we had money to pay for things and not assign it to that facility.
Well, it's good to see what it costs us just to maintain it.
Right.
Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, Madam Clerk, I have a question.
Sure.
Do you think the plan is to raise the building, the bond, I should say?
Not RAISE, but to take it down. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if it's on
Just
those-
for clarification.
Well, and that's probably, I mean, we've got a task force that's gonna be looking at the Perry House, and we're gonna have to make some tough decisions as a board. It's not
And-
gonna make everybody happy, because I
That's
don't know.
absolutely true.
I mean, we're either gonna spend a fortune, or we're gonna have to make some, I mean, Mr. Lehman, how much money have we already spent? Did we figure it was 1.2
It
million?
was, I think, and that was as close estimate as we could get from the purchase price and everything else. There's certainly some work that probably the DPW had done that
Okay.
we may not have, recorded exactly into the Perry homestead. We did the best we could going back with the records that we had.
So with regard to the Perry House, we've got a task force that will look at it closer and figure out what we wanna do, but I think it's an excellent suggestion to have the line item to keep track of general expenses. Mr. Buzak?
Absolutely.
Oh, yes, I just wanted to comment on the line. We have been assigning the Perry House on all the payables that come through, because I ask that every time I sign a check. I go over and ask, okay, is this being earmarked for the Perry House? And it is. It's a different code, so it's been coded for quite a while. And Kathy would probably know, when it actually started, but they've been
Actually-
keeping track of it, because I've asked that lots of times. but-
Actually, historically, that's why we had such difficulty finding
Right.
that list of expenditures. They've been charged all over the place.
Right.
To various counts. There hasn't been any one location that's been charged.
But in the last year or so, it hasn't been that way, because I know you have identified it.
Actually, there
'Cause I
have been a
ask
few
every
items, because
time.
there isn't really a budget for it anywhere.
I know, but they said that
So-
they were assigning it and keeping track of it somehow. I don't know how
We're
they're doing
tracking it just on
internally, because
a
they said there was a
spreadsheet,
different
but
code
it's
that was
not.
actually tracking it, and I don't know what,
Right.
I just,
There's probably a lot of expenses aren't coded though for it. I mean,
well, I asked everything
You
that
have some
looks-
being charged to the general fund, there's been some charged to parks, some charged to
Right.
capital improvement fund, there's another historical district fund. I would recommend, if we're gonna consider it a part of the park system, to make a separate cost center within the parks. You can't just include one line item, because a capital cost can't be charged to the same line item as an operational expense.
Okay.
So I would recommend a cost center within our parks
Okay.
fund.
Chairman.
And then whatever line items we need under that.
Cost center.
Yes, a cost
Okay.
center.
Cost center.
I just had one other
Okay.
comment.
That'll
on
be in
that.
the line item.
Go ahead. Mr.
when you're-
Guzak?
Yeah, the other question I had is, I know previously when we had, the millage, and we talked about part of that millage could go to the Perry House, and I know this last time we didn't do that because we used all the funds to do the basketball court, but is that still a consideration at all, or is that off the table? I was just trying to figure that out, because it's part of the recreational umbrella of the Parks and Rec, and it's under their facility. But are any potential millages gonna go to them?
Your millage language was very specific that it would be used for capital improvements within the Parks and Recreation within the township boundaries. So you can use that money, this board has the authority to put that money wherever they feel is most important, as long as it is a capital project within the Parks and Recreation system. The Perry Homestead certainly falls into that
Right.
area. She has, Director Edson has put together a list of what her projects were for 2018. They are included in the CIP in this budget document. It didn't add up totally to what the millage amount was, because some of the ones she had in there I didn't believe were actual true capital expenditures. Some of the things were, some maintenance items. So I did not include those in there, so there's already some left over. But every one of those comes back before you. None of that is an authorization to spend, so every one of them's coming back before you for your recommendation on whether you want to utilize those funds for anywhere within the
Right,
township.
because you know, that's why I was trying to recollect, because I thought you said just exactly what we're saying now, that we could have a small portion of it, you know, the bulk of it should go to Parks and Rec, but a small portion could be
Well-
earmarked, and that would go into the new capital account fund and potential.
Well, that's a
revenue.
priority that we need to decide, but I haven't discussed this with our board yet, but it's going to come before us in the next 6 months, I would guess, and Mr. Lehman, I've talked with him about it, but the Dort Highway extension, in the plans, there's plans for a non-motorized pathway to go along Baldwin Road up to Cook Road and then over from Cook to Embury. And it's not anything that we just recently came up with. It'll probably cost close to $800,000. However, I had a meeting last week with the Road Commission and also with Genesee County Planning. They feel as though they can probably get funding for 80% of it. And we would have to probably come up with 20% of it. We have a meeting scheduled for next week with them as well to take a closer look at it. And we're also seeking funding from the DNR we're going to submit some grants in March, I believe, Dennis, to the DNR for the Iron Bell Trail that it goes from Belle Isle all the way to Iron Mountain. We're one of the missing links coming through Grand Blanc, and that pathway along the Dort Highway extension would also tie into that Iron Bell Trail. It would be really nice to have both Iron Bell Trail completed and that Dort Highway extension trail. Would really give a lot of people access to the park and pretty much get quite a few places in Grand Blanc, but it'd be a nice start. We've got a lot of people in the township that'd like to see us do something with non-motorized trails. So I'm just saying that in 3 years is when we'd be looking at having to fund that 20% of that trail along the Dort Highway extension, which if we're looking at extra places, if we have extra money in the millage for Parks and Rec, I would consider non-motorized trails as part of our parks. The other thing is I'm not sure who maintains the non-motorized trail we have now going out to Bicentennial. Is that our responsibility?
Doesn't get maintained during the winter.
We do maintain a portion of that trail.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have allocated, it's not a tremendous amount, it's like $5,000 allocated for trail maintenance and cleanup. We go through and cut back, we brush it, we do some minor cleanup on it when we get.
Because I can see some work that's going to be needing to be done. I've talked to a few residents, and the trail alongside Grand Blanc Road floods out. I don't know, Mr. Heiser, as part of it, comes in front of his place, but there are parts of it that need some work, and over time that asphalt cracks and what have you. But that millage money, you know, if we're looking at where to put it, we have some things that maybe Miss Hudson didn't have on the list that are recreation. I'm not sure the Perry House, how much it falls into recreation yet. I mean, we all would like to become part of our parks, and we have it under that category, but I'm just saying we've got a few things to consider besides the Perry House when it comes to that money.
Right, alls I was trying to point out, it is a possibility, just like your other
Right.
trails are a possibility. The board's gonna decide, but I just wanted to bring it
Exactly.
back up, because I know before we were gonna use the funds to do it, and we took it out completely, and we funded it a different way for that other small addition that we
Right.
did at the Perry House,
Yeah.
and that's why I was bringing it back up.
Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chip, do we need a motion to create a cost center for the Perry House?
No, we can do that internally.
But what we would like from that, it's a great question, is initially what kind of budget would you like to see in there? Just one that we know that we're gonna expend anyway, and we know it's probably gonna be $6,000 for the year just in routine expenses, or is there an additional allocation that the board has in mind that they would like to see us put into that cost center?
I'd like to, Mr.
Go ahead,
Chair,
Mr.
I'd
Massey.
like to see additional funds go in there. Because when you think about taking the bond down, there's gonna be a cost factor there.
Well, that'll be in a
That's
capital
capital.
expenditure.
That'd be on the capital expenditure.
So we're looking at two different things, really, the general operation and then,
Okay,
Mr. Mansour?
So I guess in line with that, I guess, can we recommend, or we can ask Mr. Limina, Ms. Shostak to come back with a kind of a breakout of what line items ought to be included in there? I mean, general operations, maybe a capital, whatever the number is. And I agree with the idea of carrying over some kind of a $8,000 a year expense, how you want to put it in there, but create the right line items to categorize these things properly, and then at least start to show some level of funding there.
Yes, I have a
Okay.
question then. Is the
Sure.
funding source intended to be the general fund or part of our special revenue parks fund?
I'm
Ms.
going
Lane?
to take the leap. I'm going to suggest that I have no problem with it being under Parks and Rec, as Mr. Limita discussed it with me. But I think the minimum of $8,000 to cover the security, the lawn mowing, the lights, and all of that
General
sort of stuff
operations.
is general operations money.
General fund, okay.
Yeah, 'cause
But you're
we're
saying
paying
get
for
the-
it now anyway.
But she's wondering where we get the money and take it from general fund is.
And that's where it's been going, but it's gonna have to be directed to that one line item, and based on the initial list you gave me and a couple of checks I signed after that, I think $8,000 is, at least the minimum that it will cost to cover those
Well,
things that happen.
Well,
I'd like
whatever
to
it
see
is.
Mr. Limita and Ms. Sostak get together and take a look at what the historical expenses that you can track anyways, and then show us what you think that estimate would be, as Mr. Mansour said. So,
When you say historical, they have done that as best they can from the past. Is that, you want them to go back through to?
They've
look
already
at
done
last year's expenses and
Yeah.
budget for that amount this year, and maybe
Yeah.
whatever costs have increased.
Yeah.
Are we at this time gonna put money in for the kitchen improvements? Dennis, or?
Mr. Limina?
We can. My recommendation, if we're gonna do that, we have had the RFP, was submitted to me by, the Historic, District Commission, that had grown considerably from what I believed were the board's intentions on what was gonna be in the RFP, which was to finish the kitchen. The RFP that was presented to me also included some work in the hallway, some wallpaper stripping, some drywall repairs, some bathroom, and it appeared to have grown considerably from what I believed was the board's approved vision. I'm gonna redraw up that RFP. We thought we would probably have that into bid over the winter time, and then see what it was like if you wanted to move forward with it once we got those bids back in the spring. I believe that, we have been talking about that in a $20,000 range for the kitchen. I think that should have been looked at as coming out of the capital projects fund. That is a capital expenditure into that asset, the recreational asset that the community owns. So that's my recommendation, is if you are gonna approve that, we take it out of capital projects fund and we specifically make that capital transfer, much like we're talking about doing with the carpeting for the library, do the same thing with the kitchen repair for the Perry Homestead.
Okay. Anything other than Perry House in the budget that we want to look at? Well, we'll take another stab at this, I guess, at our next meeting, after you put together some information with regard to the library and now the Perry House.
Anything else outside of the public services budget? Is there anything else any other questions while Director Sostak's here that we can answer for you? We'll put these together, both from the library budget and from the Perry Homestead, and we won't wait till the next meeting on November 28th. I'll send our recommendations out to you ahead of time so that you can all see them.
Okay. Mr. Laddie, did you have a concern?
No, I was just trying to remind myself of what we have a public hearing requirement for our budget, and will we be noticing the public hearing at our last meeting in November for December, you envision?
I can do, I need to know where the boards, when they're ready to approve, and we will approve it no later than the meeting of December 14th, so we could do our notices then and do it. If you guys were comfortable with where we're at with the budget, we could notice it now for November 28th and just make the changes that have been discussed so far. It's really up to the board's comfort level and when you'd like us to start the notice, hold the public hearing, and schedule that. November 28th or December 14th are really your options.
What's the comfort level of the board in having it later this month as far as the public hearing?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay. Is there a consensus to go with later this month?
You wouldn't have time to make notices by that time, because that's a Tuesday, the fourth Tuesday of the month. I think the 15th.
Is it a
Mr.
10-day, do we have is it more than 10 days before the hearing?
But we have to publish it twice, and we don't even have it ready to go for publication.
I don't know if it has to be published twice, but probably taking Ms. Lane's comments as cautionary, maybe we should settle in on that.
You have to post the public hearing 8 days prior to it.
It's 8
It
days.
and it only has to be done once.
And it has to be done in the newspaper.
But,
Right.
and then,
So we have
the
time.
paper, though, it requires us to have like a 3 or 4 day lead time before it
Yeah.
hits, so.
Tuesday's the deadline for that, so we could have it
At
in next
noon.
week's.
I think the December 14th date on Thursday is the most reasonable one to do it, in case
I
any
just
other
hate
questions
delaying
come
things
up.
till
We can
last
make
minute,
it,
though.
we can have it in next
we had an issue.
Thursdays, which
Right.
would be
Right.
plenty of
Snowstorm?
time.
I have a tough time though waiting till last minute though.
I don't want to wait till the 28th, absolutely not.
Yeah, well, we're not meeting then. Mr. Laddie, Mr. Lemata?
We would be able to make the paper's deadline, I think, for Tuesday if we're prepared to go, because it's not, it's to publish it and get our information in on the dollar amounts and the millages again and publish it. We would have to have it to the paper for the 14th. It would run on the 16th, and that would certainly meet all the time frames if you guys wanted to approve it on the 28th of November.
Mr. Kent, you okay with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas, Mr. Guzak,
Yeah, that's fine.
Ms. Lane,
That's
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Okay, I think we have consensus that we'll
Right.
have the
You don't have any
hearing.
concerns, here, Kathy, as far as us putting the information we need to put together? We can have it by Tuesday.
Right, yeah.
We can give them a call and let them know that we're gonna be placing an ad and they'll save the space.
It's a big one.
Okay, anything else on the budget? Moving right along. I see my PowerPoint didn't have that item on it, that's why I skipped over it, so.
You need to
It went
talk to
from-
your administrative assistant.
It went from zoning to operational issues, so that's, okay. So, operational issues, the board will consider a motion to approve the superintendent's recommendation of entering into an agreement with Bodman Law to represent the township in workplace employment law matters.
I so move.
Motion,
Support.
supported. Any discussion? Okay,
Can't
Just
ask.
roll call.
is this roll call or no?
I think that we should do it by roll call, considering it's a contractual obligation.
Okay,
Okay.
go ahead
Mr.
and,
Kent?
Yes.
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Mr. Supervisor?
yes.
Unanimous.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
can I make one quick comment? So, in terms of the budget for next year, now that we've approved this, you're going to figure in the new cost structure, the rate for this is gonna be impacted in the budget proposal, right?
Correct. I think the biggest impact that we'll see is if we move forward with the review, which I believe we should, and that's $3,000. I think that has an impact that we need to take into consideration because that's a sure spend.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Item B, the board will hear a presentation on fiscal year 2018 Fire Commission budget requested by the Fire Commission and presented by Fire Chief Burdette and Treasurer Mr. Heiser. Good evening.
Good evening. Hopefully we'll make this short and sweet.
From Tuesday night, we made the general presentation, and there were a few questions that were asked. One was regarding the vehicle exhaust handling system, who actually physically paid for that, and I was able to find out that the Fire Commission paid for both. In 2002, Station 1 was outfitted, and in 2013, Station 3 was outfitted. And they were both paid for by the Fire Commission.
They don't have one currently, Chief, at Fire Station 1, or how did they get away with not having one?
No, Station 1 does have a handling system. However, the newer trucks that were recently purchased have the exhaust coming out of the top of the vehicle rather than the side.
Oh, okay.
So the systems in some of the bays have to be retrofitted to that. We have some that are already done, but as we purchase newer trucks, they have to retrofit that system.
Yeah, because you already did that once, right?
Yes.
Because I remember when you moved a truck from this location to that one, you had to retrofit it
Right.
to get that truck
Right.
in.
Right. So the Station 1 and 2 already have the systems in place. We just have to have retrofitted. Station 3, to my knowledge, doesn't have a system right now, unless it has a whole station ventilation system that I have to look into to find out about that. Okay?
With the budget, Chief, with the budget set up, and since we're going through the millage language and tightening things up, let's tighten it up, and I would think that the city should pay for the ventilation system in their building. Since we're gonna tighten things up, and we can't look back and say, oh, in 14 years, 15 years ago, you guys didn't pay for it. That has no bearing on me whatsoever. I think that the city should pay for their own.
Well, it should be, I agree, it should be part of the language and
Yep.
get the clarification on who pays for what. And I think this is gonna be one of those little gray areas because it is specific to the fire service. However, it's a major system in the building.
Yep.
So if, whatever we decide on that.
So how do we decide that?
Well, in the building, if
procedurally?
it's a garage, I mean, essentially.
Mhm.
If the fire department ceased to use it, it probably is not gonna be an office building. It's probably gonna continue to be a garage of some
Right, you
sort.
could-
Which the ventilation system is gonna probably be used for who knows what, snowplow trucks or
Possibility,
something.
right.
So in that regard, it probably is part of the fixture of the building and not. Mr. Kent?
I agree with Mr. Thomas that we're kind of defining the lines now so that there isn't all this ambiguous areas and gray areas. Let's just say that's what it is right now. Maybe however we did it in the past was a mistake, it sounds like. Of course, it sounds like it always worked out for one party's benefit, so.
Ms. Lane?
When you're talking about the ventilation system, the other thing I'd remind the city is, you gentlemen are talking about the health and safety of the firefighters that are sleeping there, and I can tell you from times in the past here, we've had to vacate our planning department in that because of some exhaust systems from our garage seeping into this building. So it's not just mechanically for the trucks, it's for the health and safety and welfare of the firefighters.
Well, I agree.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's why it was put in. I was here when
Mr.
they put it
Mansour?
in.
So I think coming back to the discussion we had on Tuesday, I think that was part of the discussion then was to, as we approved the fire budget here, to be more prescriptive on what the differences are between capital, things that go with the stations themselves and things that the fire commission would be responsible for. So we were gonna kind of add that as a staple that to the budget.
Right.
So how do we do this procedurally then, Dennis? I'm Mr. Limita.
This really, that's gonna be defined, a couple ways. Number one, in the new ordinance, I think we have to, that we're still working on, we have to be much more definitive in, our descriptions. And I think by that, I mean, when I say more definitive, I think we're gonna put in there like, and then we're gonna put specific
Right.
examples in, kitchens, kitchen cabinets, ventilation. I mean, I think we're gonna have to be, you're never gonna be able to cover everything, but I think you can list enough to where you get the general capture of what the intentions were. The other thing is, every year, our ordinance requires the fire commission to prepare and give us their capital equipment purchases. So every year, we look at that capital budget of things that they're recommending to move forward. I think that we can include some of the things that we want to make sure that are they capital purchases that are truly, coming out of the capital account, or are those fire commission expenses? And I think it requires all of us to be very diligent in seeing what is being planned, because those are out in advance. It's gotta be a 5-year, according to our ordinance, 5-year capital plan at the minimum out ahead of us before we approve the budget. So we're looking out, they're saying in 5 years, I'm gonna do a kitchen, or I'm gonna put a ventilation system in there. We can be very specific about, well, does that belong in that capital expenditure list, or does that belong, who's paying for it, when's it gonna be paid for, what do we need to do to work that out ahead of time, so that there's no surprises after the expense has occurred.
Two things, Fire Chief. Does that ventilation system have to be checked like annually to make sure that it's, working properly? And
Not that I'm aware of. It's a vacuum system that the minute the truck starts, you'll hear it come on and start moving
Yeah.
air out of the building.
I'm just curious, because it seems like a pretty deadly thing that if it's not working, you don't want to find out.
You can smell it, because before we had it,
Yeah.
you could tell immediately.
I wouldn't want to depend on
You get
Yeah,
smelling
so you-
it.
headache,
could.
And then you just
Yeah.
get tired and sleepy.
I just wondered, because if
Well,
it's
they
part
work.
of,
That's true.
furnace
That's what
system, but, okay.
Mr.
When does
Chief.
this have to be approved by?
It'd have to be approved by the end of December.
This same time as ours then?
Yes.
So if we wanted to wait till same time we approve ours, we can do that?
Right.
Okay,
Mr.
Mr.
Chief.
Massey?
And then,
I have a question for the chief.
Yes.
You have a carbon monoxide detector, right?
We have carbon
Oh, they
monoxide
can-
detectors in the
so good.
sleeping areas.
But if it's not functioning, doesn't that raise an alarm?
Yeah, I was thinking it probably does.
It would, yes.
Right.
Okay.
So we're covered that way.
Yeah.
Mr. Guzak?
yeah, but just another question, that the supervisor brought up is, I know he was talking about the maintenance of it, the checking on it, but is there any maintenance on those machines? Because if there is maintenance, we've got to decide, ongoing maintenance, like once a year, you might want to check certain things, which is going back to what you're saying. And then who's supposed to pay for that? Do we want that on the building, or do we want it on the commission?
Like the
So
HVAC, who checks that and who pays for that?
Yeah,
the
again,
HVAC should be
The
the building.
building.
I'm
right?
not aware of
It's the
any
building.
maintenance program for it. We've never had any maintenance done it other than
But we
if it
haven't had
fails,
that
we
long, 'cause
call
it's
the
fairly
manufacturer to
new.
repair it.
So the heating, cooling though, who maintains it? If you have an issue at Fire Station 1 or Fire Station 3?
Today, it's Station
bu-
1 is the city handles it, and the Station 3, the township.
Okay,
handles it.
so
Right.
we send out our people, if it's one of our buildings,
Yes.
to look at the
Mhm.
HVAC?
Right.
Okay.
And
So
seeing that we had daylight savings time, you did check the batteries in the alarm system, right?
Yes,
Fire
we
alarm
did.
system. We do have a fire alarm system.
Carbon
right?
monoxide detectors are only good for
Smoke
5
de-
years.
We have a good smoke detector?
You
for
sure do.
breakout?
Yes.
They can smell it. Okay, who else had a question? I thought I saw somebody with their hand up. Mr. Limita?
I just want to point out, it seems like a lot of the questions that we're getting on the budget have to do, a lot of them are going to reflect back into the ordinance that we're working on, in that ordinance language, to make sure we're protected moving forward. And for the budget, the actual budget itself, the 2018 proposed budget that Chief Burdett is presenting, I know he's looking for, or hoping for a motion of approval unless there's some specific questions. So I think you guys will consider that this evening. I don't know if there's any changes that you're asking him to make before if he comes back, or if there's any very big concerns that you might have in here as far as the funding level or expenditures. Be a good time to have him change those, now, so that he'd be able to do that on the 28th.
Well, Chief, I think, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
Well, I would like to change that to make that for the ventilation system, take that out of the budget, and that should go to the entity that owns the building.
Mr. Guzak?
It's going to be handled through the ordinance.
Yes.
Well, I
No,
understand.
we're talking about in this
Yeah,
budget
but-
year.
It's
though.
not- This is for this
Well,
budget.
there is nothing in this budget year
Right.
for the
Right.
ventilation system at
Oh,
all.
there isn't?
No.
No,
But should
no,
we
nothing
put-
in the budget.
No,
No,
there's nothing in there as
the
far as
Is
expenditure
that in
for
the
this year.
capital?
It's just for
Not in
furniture
capital,
within the
not
station.
anywhere, right?
There, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
There was a notation about that, remember? But
Yes.
there was no dollar amount in there.
Right.
Yes.
I brought it up because I didn't like that the fire commission was doing
I
it.
know last time we had a list of capital things, we said it wasn't part of the budget.
Right,
And then we
and it
found out later that,
They didn't care.
yeah.
And
Mr. Guzak?
that's my question. Is there anything else, like we had last time, we specifically said, this isn't covered, we're approving it in the budget, but we're not gonna cover that. Is there anything in like that?
No.
Because if there is, one suggestion that someone brought up to me, that we could line out those items, okay? That way they're still in the budget, but they're lined out saying, we're not gonna approve those monies, but at least it's been referenced. And then it's a lot harder to say, well, it's in the budget, and so you have to pay for it. Well, if there's a line through it, now they can say, yeah, there's a line there because we said we would not pay for that, but we recognize this might occur. So is there anything in there like that we might have to?
There's nothing in there.
Okay,
Chief,
I just
would that-
trying to
would it help
verify.
If you just walk them through the capital
Sure.
purchases that you have intended for 2018.
Sure. For 2018, just a quick review of what we have.
Oh,
Oh, I got it right here.
I've got my copy right here.
Yep.
this is- hold on.
I'm with you guys.
Under the real and personal property, we have two items that we're looking to purchase for this next year. One is a station alert system for $500. And the other one is to replace the furniture within a communication room and in the day room downstairs, which is the recliners that the firefighters use for $3,000, so $3,500 there. Our capital fund for equipment replacement, there are 4 items there that we're looking for. One is to purchase a new AED, or to replace an obsolete item that's on a truck. To purchase 6 sets of turnout gear for $14,500. To purchase 4 personal 2-gas monitors to be worn on turnout gear when they're in structures, so they can know when the air is safe to take off the breathing apparatus. And multiple sections of hose for $2,500. So in all, we're looking at total capital expenditures, I believe it was around $26,000.
Couple of items that we had in that budget that I know kind of raised a few eyebrows was the building maintenance, and we said that it's really not building maintenance, it's more like cleaning supplies, those types of things.
That's true. I believe at the next fire commission meeting, there will be a line item on our agenda to discuss renaming a couple of those line
Yeah, we
items.
just
as
renamed it, right?
historic.
And the same with building insurance, maybe
Right,
liability insurance.
just drop the word building insurance and change it to liability insurance.
'Cause I'd like those changes.
Right. I agree.
That's no problem.
Ms. Lane?
I know our finance director is, by state law, required to come up with new line items. And my suggestion would be that she work with the chief and Mr. Limita, and that they help you get your budgets more in line with what we look at all the time, and also comply with state law regarding the new chart of accounts and everything, that everything has to start being done that way.
That'd
Do
be
we
no
now
problem.
not do that?
We
or-
have a set of chart of accounts now, but they're being modified, and the finance director knows about it and is getting prepared to do it. But I'm just bringing it
Yeah.
to the attention of the
Right,
fire
yeah.
chief that I would like to see, my personal preference is, I would like to see him developing budgets and giving them to Mr. Limita, and that those budgets come looking in the same way.
Right.
These budgets that we get for all of our other departments, so that we're building, again, consistency that you gentlemen and I have been asking for.
So you're not
That's no
currently-
problem at all.
Okay.
Oh.
Good idea. So I don't know, I'm hearing that we want to hold off till December. I don't know, Mr. Limita, is there any issue with us waiting until, till later this month, till November 28th, when we approve our budget for the,
I
I
don't see any issue with that at all,
Okay.
but, I mean,
The city did make a motion to approve it last
The
night, so
city-
they're ready to go.
yes, they did.
and-
okay. And it also sounds like, I don't know, it sounds like there's a consensus that we'd like to have that, well, it isn't in this budget, so we don't have to.
Clarification, it is, I'm looking at our packet that was sent to us, and it is in the proposed internal fund budget for real and personal property. That's where I saw that.
that's true, there is no dollar amount for it.
Right,
So
so
we-
I think, to
we
Mr.
could
Guzak's
remove it
point,
out.
we need to just get that right out of there, right?
Yes, we can remove it. Mhm.
Or Mr. Thomas, both, or whatever, whoever said it.
Change internal fund, delete it.
I cannot remove the internal fund this year. It'll be next year.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Any
Okay.
other questions for the chief? Otherwise, we'll move along.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Heiser. The board will consider a motion here to approve an agreement between the Genesee County Road Commission and the Charter Township of Grand Blanc for the construction of a roundabout at the intersection of Hill and Belsey Roads. This agreement authorizes the use of a portion of the township allocation of 50/50 annual allotment from the Road Commission for 2018 to pay for the required 25% local match for the construction project.
So move.
Okay?
I would
Support.
support that if you're willing to add in that our total cost is $52,000, Mr.
Massey.
Massey, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Go along with that change?
Yes.
Yeah, because
Okay.
that'll be helpful, because when it comes through, we'll have a dollar amount that we can
Right.
verify
I
that
had
we were
52,000.
authorized.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, there's been a motion, been seconded. Any discussion?
One point,
Yes.
we discussed some of that, half of that coming out of our,
50/50.
50, our
All of it's gonna come out of the 50/50.
It's coming out of 50, out of our 50/50 allocation, it's a match, so we'll pay $26,000, and the road commission will pay the other $26,000.
that's what I meant, so
Out
it's
of
not
our,
52,
out of our,
it's
other parts
26.
that we're supposed to
Out
get.
of the portion that they, up to, they'll match us up to that amount, so.
Right.
Even though it comes from the road commission's budget, it would have been spent in the township as long as we matched it somewhere else. So I guess it does have the impact of 52,000, but we're really only responsible for
There you go.
26,000.
That's what I wanted clarified. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay.
And who, Mr. Bennett, you are handling my request that they look into putting perennials that are self-sustaining in the center rather than asphalt.
I would like some board direction on that, because, I mean, if we agree to put planting in the center of that, we're gonna have to figure out how we maintain it. So I guess I would like to see us do that, but we need to look at, I think maybe we do this, we talk to the road commission and find out, if it's possible to
Right.
even do it, number one. The engineering's already been done, I don't know if they can just leave that open and put dirt in it, I'm sure they've got drainage issues they gotta look at and what have you.
They can do it in Rochester, it can be done in
Right,
Gramley.
but they may have been engineering that from the beginning to have planting, and I don't know if the engineering at this point would be capable of that, but we will inquire and find out. And
Okay.
if it is a possibility, then the next step is finding somebody that could maintain it, and we'll bring it back to the board. So, Mr. Mansour?
Yeah, so I think that's a interesting comment. If you draw back on it a little bit, we want something aesthetically pleasing if possible in there.
Right.
You're thinking greens, but maybe there's something else that is like a in between.
Statue?
Like exactly. Like maybe we could have.
The
I mean, if-
sewer statue?
Confederate.
I was gonna suggest yours.
Okay, so
Billboards.
that's an option, of course. But I guess what I'm more thinking is, I mean, maybe there's a local person who has an idea for some kind of a piece of art or something to kind of start to give a little personality to the place. I'm just suggesting that I like the idea of aesthetically using it, but I don't like the idea of us spending time maintaining it. So, just a thought.
Why doesn't somebody look and see if they see any other roundabouts that communities have done to, make them appealing without plants? The thing that I hate seeing is just asphalt that eventually cracks and
Sure.
falls apart and doesn't get maintained either.
Hey,
Mr.
you're
Guzak?
sliding my way.
Mr. Guzak?
Oh, yeah, I would just wonder if we could ask our police chief, not to just to think about it and tell it, report to us later, because it is possibly a safety issue to our drivers. And if here again, you can think about it and tell us later, but, if you have something out, I think it's a great idea. But they mentioned that the roundabout that was down on Swartz Creek had gravel in it, and evidently people are driving right on through, and there's gravel everywhere, so I can envision somebody hitting whatever's in that middle, so I would like you to.
I can tell you I have experience with both roundabouts in Genesee County. I used to live in Swartz Creek and came through there daily. And it's gravel or pea stone or whatever, and now there's gravel all over the roundabout on the lanes of traffic. There's weeds growing up through the gravel. I was gonna snap a picture of it last time I was through there, but I couldn't get stopped to get out and do it. The one at Bristol and, what is it,
Yeah.
Bristol and
Bristol.
Van Slyke
75.
area at 75, that's cement. But you can tell where vehicles have driven up over that, and it's almost a little ramp.
Right.
So I'd hate to be the car that drives up over that, but that seems to be, especially on those roads and at Hill and Belsey, those are high-speed roads. Those aren't, downtown areas that have a roundabout where you're going 25. That's a 50, 55 mile an hour zone, and all of a sudden you have a roundabout you have to go through.
Right.
So some people aren't prepared for that and drive through those roundabouts to the center, and certainly causes some traffic safety issues.
So what do you think on Belsey and Hill? Is that, I mean, what's the speed limit, 45?
50.
50.
50?
Yep.
So you might encounter the same situation as you do
Right.
on those other.
I'm all for making it aesthetically pleasing, but I don't know what the best answer is, because you're gonna get a car to go through there.
Mr. Massey?
Yeah.
I think
I hope it's not me.
On Bristol Road in front of the GM metal fab plant, I think if you have a mound there, it doesn't stop anyone from going over, but it's sort of elevated, so with concrete, it doesn't require any maintenance for many years unless in the concrete cracks.
Right.
That would be my suggestion.
Well, we'll talk with the road commission and see what they tell us about
Yeah, they might
plantings
not
or
even
what have you.
allow it.
It doesn't sound like you're really in favor of this roundabout.
I
Chief
am in
Wiles.
favor of the roundabout. I happen to
Not
live
at
out
that
on that
spot?
end of the township, and I know the benefits of roundabouts in other areas of the state and county, and it would do wonders for that intersection.
Was I correct in my assessment the other night that that's one of the worst intersections as far as traffic goes in our township, or you get the most complaints about?
We get a lot.
How
We see a
about
lot.
Fenton and Hill Road?
Fenton Hills in the county is the highest accident intersection.
Right.
Half that intersection
Yes.
though is the Metro Mundy Township. That's not all ours.
Right.
Fenton and Hill is what?
The highest accident count in Genesee County.
Fenton and Hill.
Fenton,
Right,
The
right
whole
by.
county.
Fenton.
Yep.
I'd figure Miller Road or something.
Miss Lane?
I'm gonna push even harder that you guys go down to Rochester, on 25 Mile Road, and look at something that looks better. Because remember, we're having a Dort Highway, and all of these engineers decided to put in roundabouts everywhere. And if you want it, you want to put in a bike path, right?
Non-motorized path, correct?
Okay,
I think a lot of people do it, isn't just me, but
right.
sure.
But do they want to just see always in every roundabout in Genesee County, cement and asphalt and gravel that continually looks a mess?
I think we all agree with you, Kathy.
We're gonna look into it. Yeah,
Well,
we're gonna look into
I'm
it.
pushing it because we don't have
We're
just
just
one. It's
concerned
gonna
about
be-
the safety of our residents. That's all we're bringing the point out. And the
Rochester
county might
wouldn't
even
do
tell us we
anything to
can't do
hurt it.
anything.
But Al made a good point. You're only gonna hit it once.
But Kathy, may I ask you a question?
What?
Great point.
How long has that roundabout been?
In Rochester?
Yes.
I would say within the last 2 years.
Where in Rochester?
25 Mile Road going east to Hayes.
Well, we'll
Yes,
talk, I mean,
because I just saw them this
it's
week.
gonna be, not our entire decision, but, we'll talk to the road commission. I'll do that.
If we're gonna
Okay.
be leaders, we gotta be
Yeah,
positive.
absolutely. Okay,
Thank you,
so,
gentlemen.
we had a motion on that and seconded, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? There you go. Okay, item D, Mr. Limita, did you wanna
Absolutely.
discuss that issue?
We briefly discussed about this earlier, and unfortunately, we had to revise the agenda to get it on there. And I did give you transmittal as well as some information that the board had requested. And if you look, I kind of walk through the employment manual and the language we have in regards to the in lieu of medical insurance payments. Currently, the township offers $1,200. It is in it's annually, it is in our employment manual. It is also in all of the collective bargaining agreements. The language varies between our employment manual and the CBAs. None of the language is exactly the same, which caused me some concern, and there have been some changes with the Affordable Care Act that make our language potentially non-compliant with the ACA. So I did have a conversation with a labor attorney today about our language, and we need to take a little bit of deeper dive in there because it did cause me some concerns that right now we have potentially some non-compliant language with the ACA that needs to be cleaned up. So in order to affect this change, we're going to have to get through that language. We're going to have to schedule some meetings with the unions, and I mean, it's a good thing that we're doing because we're giving people the option to make better choices about their benefits if they have some additional options from a spouse's insurance, for example. If you look at the spreadsheet that I gave you, Grand Blanc Township was at $1,200 annually. We were at the bottom of the scale. If you look at the graphic, it went up to $7,800 as a high. The average was 36 something, 3683 or something like that. I think 3648 annually. My recommendation was that we moved it to $3,500 for everyone. It's a relatively simple process to take care of in our employment manual because I can change that policy 6.3 within the employment manual. The board can approve it, and it applies to everybody outside of the collective bargaining agreements. But the collective bargaining agreements, we need to basically ask them because if it's okay to reopen those specifically for this one item. Of course, the benefit to them is that we're willing to offer additional to reopen this item, but the goal is to clean up the language. There's no reason why the unions wouldn't be just as happy as we are to make sure that we're ACA compliant within the language of our collective bargaining agreements. It should have been looked at and done in those negotiations since December of 2016 and through August of this year. For that, I apologize, going through and trying to clean up as much language as possible. But clearly I didn't, read through this or look at it in those terms. Of course, we weren't thinking about making that request to the board to increase it at that point. So I guess we have I would really still like to move forward with it. We are in open enrollment through the end of December. People can make decisions about their health care. I think I can get it done, and in the off chance that we weren't able to get all the unions to sit down at the table, go through, and it may be that when we review their language that we find that not all of them need to be changed. Only some of them would need to be tweaked to make sure we're ACA compliant. But then we would be able to move forward. One of the interesting things I found in the survey that we went through with all of these 25 municipalities, there were 2 municipalities that stated 50% of their employees, when they raised it, took the opt-out for medical coverage and took the in lieu of payment instead of the medical coverage. Now, our benefits are really good, high caliber benefits. I don't think you're gonna get 50% of the employees. But if you were to get some employees, and again, you look on that sheet on the front page of the transmittal that I provided for the board, after the 20% contribution, our cost for a family is $15,000 for the year. Our cost for a double is $11,952 for the year, and for a single is $4,996. We would not need very many people to make that switch to a opt-out on this in order to reap some benefits from it. So I would ask the board to at least consider making the motion that I put on the back and specifically include the language, the motion to increase the in lieu of medical coverage payment from $1,200 to $3,500 annually, contingent on all township policies, employment manuals, and collective bargaining agreements being fully compliant with all provisions of the Affordable Care Act. The reason I'm specifically asking the language about contingent upon all those, if we don't get all of them, if we don't get all the unions at the table to agree and that we've hit it, then it wouldn't go into effect until such time we do have that done. Conceivably at next open enrollment in 2019, at the very latest will be when we go through next round of negotiations. But I think we can realize a cost savings here by giving people the option. But we don't want to do it unless it's all in. We need to have it all prepared so what we roll it out. So it's contingent upon all of our language is consistent across the board in every one of our collective bargaining agreements and employment manual. be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Thomas?
I'd like to make that motion with the
Support.
exact language.
Mr.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I do have a
Yes, sir.
question. Where you say you insert continuous?
Contingent, yep.
Contingent, where?
So if you look on the very last paragraph on the second page of my transmittal, and you'll see that last paragraph, I bolded it. The motion was to increase the in lieu of medical coverage payment from $1,200 to $3,500 annually,
Yes.
contingent on all township policies, employment manuals.
Okay.
And I think that's the key word, is that they all.
It's already in the language, Mr. Massey.
Yeah.
Because that'll go back to the us two clauses in the police contract and such.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions, discussion? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, to the attorney, again, since this has effect on the possible contracts, do you want this to be a roll call vote as well?
I don't think this one needs to be, because it's
All right.
really giving direction to Dennis to execute this to the extent that he can in the existing agreements. So-
Okay, thank you.
And then, Mr. Limita, you'll probably report back to us on this, and we'll take,
This is gonna be a little bit of a full court press to get it done as quick as possible, and that means a lot of moving parts with different union representatives to come in. And, I mean, it's a good thing, and there's a lot of reasons why they would wanna do it, because they get the opportunity to, you know, it's a very specific reopener. This is a mandatory subject of collective bargaining, so we have to sit at the table. But in exchange for agreeing to bring the language up to compliance with the ACA, we're willing to offer a bit extra on the in lieu of payment. So it's really a win-win for everybody. And they should, like I said, they should have just as strong of a reason to want that language to be compliant with the ACA as we do, because if I'm the union, I don't want non-compliant language in my agreement any more than the employer does.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Mr. Kent?
through you to Mr. Laddie, this motion, if, doesn't make this absolutely happen. It just gives direction to proceed, correct?
Correct, but if it turns out that we've got the participation of
Yes.
all the unions
Yes.
and
does.
whatever other entities, then it will
That's what I
be
mean.
implemented, but it'll be reflected in each of those agreements separately.
Right.
So it is a green light if we can get it all together.
With that, I want to make sure we clarify and define the in lieu of qualification.
And that's, I'm glad you brought that up. That was one of the challenges, and I've had a conversation with some of you about it, and when you get that in lieu of, and it should mean in lieu of, but the way the wording is in some of the agreements
Yes.
gives me cause for concern. So that's part of the cleanup of this.
That's what I'm
Is
asking.
that language needs to be consistent from our employment manual
Yes.
to every single one of our agreements that has the same language, and it talks about the truly in lieu of.
Yes.
Where we've got it, we just have it, the way it's been historically is we've got something different in almost every agreement.
Well, that's why I asked the initial question. So if that can't get defined, Mr. Laddie, then this would really not happen.
That's correct.
It's
You would have to revisit it in the
Okay.
future. And as Mr. Lehman said, it's an all or nothing deal.
Yes, very good.
Okay, Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, the only question I have is, I know they're switching from an annual payment to a monthly payment, which will help our cash flow a lot. I was just curious, is there provisions in there if someone leaves part year, because normally they had to have a whole year in or whatever, is it gonna take things back away from employees, or?
We were
have you thought
required
about that?
to prorate it if they left anyways, because they
Right.
had already done the opt-out on it. So even if we said $1,200
Right.
for the year, if they left after 6 months, we were required to, even though we say we only issue these payments in December.
Right.
We were
So they would get the
required
6-month payment.
to
This
pay
way,
the
at least it'll
6-month
help our
payment.
cash flow.
Yep, this way, if somebody leaves, we're paying it, if we pay
We're
it
all
out
done with
monthly,
it.
it just becomes much easier.
Yeah, because you don't have to do anything.
Absolutely.
Right. And I want to thank you for all the information that's in here, because it's very nice, and it's explained very well, and it's nice to have the charts and the background, so thanks for digging this up.
You're welcome, thank you.
And this
Mr.
would,
Thomas?
this would reach out to the Parks and Rec and everybody that we do payroll for, correct?
Well, we don't control Parks and Rec because they're employees of the Parks and Rec Commission, although they've always followed everything that we've done. So I can't imagine why they wouldn't want to offer the same thing that we're offering, but again, we don't control their ability to do that or not.
But that's my question. Would you reach out to the Parks and Rec and let them know that we're, I'm sure they probably know already, but.
No, there's more than 2. There's 5.
There's 5.
Parks and Rec?
Yeah.
To get healthcare? Okay.
I thought they had 7 full-time workers.
5 and then,
Is
yeah.
it 7?
7.
Yeah.
They have 7. It's not 5, it's 7.
There are 5 medical subscribers at the Parks and Recreation.
So
And
there'd
then
be
2
2
get some
people that
of
would be qualified right now then. I would take it that
Right.
there's probably 2 that are getting in lieu of then.
There are, I don't know that anyone's getting in lieu of from Parks and Recreation. I don't see that.
But they'll decide, I
There's-
guess.
I thought Carol and,
I don't know.
I don't
Yeah. So they'll be
But
aware
you're-
of it, and I guess that's, right now anyways, it's the Parks Commission that will make those decisions, but.
But you're gonna reach out to all the people that follow our guidelines to let them know. I don't, you know what I'm saying?
The fire
You know, it's
department,
like
too.
with the fire commission employees, the fire department, they're really employees of the township.
Correct.
That's where it's different, and they do have to follow our employment manual.
Right.
In the full-time firefighters collective bargaining agreement, there is no mention of in lieu of, so that automatically then, because it's not in their agreement, automatically defaults to our employment manual. So they're eligible for it based upon our employment manual language. If it's not discussed in their actual labor agreement, then our employment manual takes precedent. So that was already addressed with them. When we make the change to employment, we will not have to sit down with the IAFF to include this because it will automatically take place when we put it into our employment manual.
Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, so if we do approve this and we get it to work out, hopefully we do, does that doesn't force the Parks and Recs to do it. They have their own choice, right? They can either
Correct.
do it or not do it.
Correct.
It's completely up to them, right?
But they're paying the same amounts out that we are.
Right,
Because
I
their
know.
employees are also participating at the 20% premium contribution.
Right.
So I would think that if they could cut their costs down from $15,000 to $3,500, they would probably make
Probably
that
just gonna
available.
jump on it, but I would think employees would want it, so.
Mr. Thomas?
Question for my task force members real quick. When we met last week, didn't Kay say that they followed our manual? I know she did.
Our policy manual?
Yes.
Yeah. I
Our
think
employee
they,
manual.
I
I
think
believe
they
she
do
did.
refer to it, but.
They do have their own employee manual. At the Parks and Recreation Department does have their own employee manual, separate from ours. So they're not, they follow our policies pretty much, like the 20%, that kind of stuff. But they do have their own employment manual, and I don't know that in that employment manual, there's anything addressed in there about the in lieu of.
Okay.
Well, that'll be their decision at this point anyways.
Well, this
Ms.
is
Lane?
part of the training that we have to give to our board member that goes back to Parks and Rec, because that's part of your responsibility too,
Well,
Mr. Thomas.
That's why the task force looking at the whole
Right.
thing,
Yeah.
so.
And how that's structured, so. I mean, right now, we're kind of in a middle area because
Right.
we're looking at it and we're operating under their current operations, so.
Right.
Whether or not that's always gonna be true is determined in the future, so. Okay, so any other action we need to take on that, or did,
I think there's,
Did we
we
take
got
a
a
vote?
motion and a second.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. What are we hearing from the community? And Kathy told me she doesn't have anything for this.
No, that's, no, I told,
Kathy cornered me today and said, I've got something for that part of the agenda. I said,
and he says, oh, what is it? And I says, if I tell you, then you're gonna take it as yours. So I said, I'm not telling you.
That's my favorite meeting so far.
go
So-
ahead, Ms. Lane.
We have had a different kind of a fall, and we've had questions coming into the township and to Emterra. Emterra got a call from their composting site and said, hey, what are you doing about leaves? We're not getting a whole lot right now. And Fred said he answered, they're on the trees. And that is happening, I can tell you from my backyard. So, I asked the question outside the box. Our composting stops with Emterra the last Wednesday of the month of November, November 29th. And because we want to make sure our residents have good service, I said, Fred, would you find, and he found me 3 compost sites that are open for a short time into December that we can have our residents take their leaves and their compost to, so that they don't have to keep it in their yards, their garages, or anywhere else. And so as soon as I have contacted all of them, when I called one today, I asked the ladies, well, is there a fee? And both ladies said, we don't know, we'll call you back. So I have their names, their addresses, their locations, but I'll put out a spreadsheet and we'll put it on the website, because I think we might have people needing a compost site after November 29th.
Thank you, Kathy, or Miss Lane. Anybody else hear anything in the community? Mr. Massey?
Chair, at Grand Blanc Road in Emory,
Yes.
we still have that congestion. Do you think, I'm thinking that when the construction is completed at Holly and I-75, I think it will alleviate some of the traffic congestion.
Yeah, and actually, I got a notice that they're probably going to open the new ramp, I believe tomorrow or something like that, and then they're gonna. It's good. There's going to be some interruption there for a few more days because they have to move some barriers on 75 that are redirecting traffic. They have to do some relining. So you may see a few more days, but it's nearing the end of the construction. I would guess that by the middle of next week, it'll pretty much be cleared up and be clear sailing there. But there is construction on Thompson Road that I think is directing traffic to try and get on 23 from Grand Blanc Road. That should be wrapping up in the next week, I would guess, from what I've seen. So those 2 projects may help. Mr. Guzak?
Oh, yes, I just wanted to thank thank you for bringing that up, because I know they talked about not putting a light there, okay, because it's too close.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I don't know if the city's under different regulations, but if you look at the city, right there across from Starbucks, there's a light right there, and then there's light within 10 feet, a lot closer, we at Big Boys. And I've seen a couple other lights the same way, but it might be that the county roads, and that's a city road, so the city allowed to have it happen, but I think a light is what's needed there. You know, hopefully what you're saying will occur, but if it doesn't, I'm all in favor of putting a light there, because we can't have new businesses coming in there and having to have 15 to 20 minutes to get the heck out of there just to go to lunch, because if you go the other way, it's way the heck down.
Yeah. Mr. Massey?
I understand what you're saying, but let me refer my question to the chief, police chief. It's because when you put a light there, you create another congestion. Because one light has to be timed so perfectly for the other light. And if you get too many cars.
I understand that, but it's working in Grand Blanc. You've got a light, if you look at it.
Not to cut anybody off, I'll tell you what's going on right now with it. We had a traffic study. Anybody that's been down there saw that they had the tubes going across the lanes to check the traffic. So we should get back some information, but the road commission will be the one who decides what's going to go there. And they actually, in their long-range plan, they have a roundabout there.
That's what I was just going to say.
So
Give us another
we'll
roundabout.
see if the traffic study shows that it's needed, but I have a feeling that the Dort Highway extension also, when that's completed, is going to alleviate a lot of traffic off that road as well. But we aren't going to solve it tonight, but I don't know, Police Chief Wiles, is there anything we can do in the meantime? I don't know. It's too dangerous probably to have any officer out there directing traffic.
I agree. I don't want an officer out there.
And it's a resource issue too. I mean, I can put an officer out there, but it takes away that officer from doing several other things
Right.
throughout the day, so.
And I would think it'd probably be too dangerous with the traffic at the speed that it's coming off Dort Highway. I mean.
The traffic study will shut up.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Anybody else hearing anything from the community?
I want to hear your answer. You took from me the estimates for Office Park Drive and something, oh.
Right, I asked you for a copy of them. I had them,
Right,
but
and you said you were gonna talk to somebody who, at the road commission, who said, oh no, they'd never be that high.
I had a meeting, and their head engineer thought the price was exorbitant. And so I told him I would email him the copy of the estimates that we received. I emailed him a copy of both Office Park Drive. Office Park Drive, anybody's familiar with it, it comes off McCandless Road near Guardian Mortgage.
And then
Mr.
right
Laddie's office is on there, but
Isn't there a really famous lawyer that has an office?
Yes.
World famous.
it came out to be about $40,000 per lot on the Office Park Drive to pave that stretch. I don't know, it's probably not even a quarter of a mile, I would guess, but anyways, it comes out to 40,000 per lot, so if you divide that by 10 years, 4,000. We received more no's than yeses, so it doesn't look like that's gonna move forward, but that was one of them that Mr. Pavandi questioned. The other one was what was the other neighborhood, Miss Lane, Village Green?
Village Green.
Village
For
Green
21,000
comes out to
apiece.
21,000 per resident. And his response back after I emailed him to him, he's like, I think his response was, well, how do you allocate this? Well, we divide it by 10, basically. So I'm not quite sure. He early on thought it was exorbitant, but I guess after he looked at it, he agreed that that's what the price is supposed to be. So we didn't have any luck there. I thought maybe he would find an error in it, but he said they have never seen any that high before. So
Welcome to
I
the
also
real
checked on the letter for Dr. Schick for that neighborhood. He's been awaiting a letter from the road commission to state that the roads in Village Green will have a 15-year life expectancy so that they can amortize the cost of, if they go ahead, over 15 years. And I've not received that letter yet from Mr. Daly. So I know some of you are waiting to take that letter
But
to...
we gave him a letter from Attorney Laddie.
Right, but Dr. Schick wanted one in the neighborhood wanted one from the road commission as well. But it doesn't appear that we're going to be getting that letter in time.
Just for correction's sake, it wasn't Mr. Laddie that had the email, it was our bond attorney is the one that said that with the language that was presented to us would be sufficient for a 15-year bond presentation.
Right, the residents wanted a letter though from the road commission to
Right,
take
well, that's
around to
fine.
their neighborhood, but...
They're not gonna get one, but.
Right. But Mr. Daly had promised Dr. Schick that, as well as myself, so maybe he'll still be coming. Anything else anybody's hearing from the community? Okay. With that, we'll run through board reports. Mr. Mansour, anything to report?
So, no, I think things at the Planning Commission, the board has asked me to get a number of items on the agenda in terms of a timeline for them to take a look at. Things working with Attorney Laddie on like the DAS ordinance. I think they're somewhere in the queue there. And of course, I asked for this some months ago, and at the meeting just last week, they requested an email specifically asking for each ordinance or each review exactly why board wanted to do that. So I will construct that email and make sure that at least Chairman Bennett, you see it. But I had to tell him I'm pretty disappointed that they sat on the request for 2 months, and then when I questioned for a timetable, they kind of come back with a, well, geez, you should have told me exactly what you want. So anyway,
Okay,
but I'll do that and remove any excuse.
Okay.
Can I just one more thing?
Sure.
Other thing I'm kind of responsible for is connecting in with the Metro Alliance.
Yes.
So meeting last October on it. Again, the things that you covered, you already really touched on here, which was the dues, which were carryover, and we got approval of that, so that's good. They did review the Dort Highway extension with the whole county, so all the municipalities around there have an understanding of what's going on there. Same thing they've reviewed with us. And then finally, they had a public hearing on TIP Amendment Number 7. And basically what it did is move about 50% of the allotted funds that were scheduled for 2017 programs into 2018. Traffic operations, bridge repairs, et cetera. Nothing in particular related to the township. They're all kind of outside. But I thought it was interesting that they actually had planned to spend a certain amount of money and really didn't get it spent in the fiscal year. So that's all I have on behalf of those two areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mansour. Mr. Massey, or I'm sorry, Mr. Thomas, with regard to Parks and Rec.
We're, the Finance Committee of the Parks and Rec Commission is working on the budget, and they're waiting for one person to vote on it, to clean up the language. That would be me. And we meet next Thursday to vote on the budget. Also, we have a member at large that is up for re-election. And on top of that, we have 3 resumes that we're going to be scheduling interviews for the member at large. And just so the board knows that my buddy and our new lieutenant, I believe, or Lieutenant Matthew Simpson turned in a resume for that position to get more involved with the township, which I think is awesome. So, and on a side note on Parks and Rec, the Parks and Rec Task Force has had our first meeting, and in the next week or so, I'm hoping that the task force will be meeting on the Perry House.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Massey?
No new information at this time.
Okay, Mr. Kent?
I'd like to share something from some police statistics. We met fourth Tuesday of October, and year ending 2015 compared to year ending 2016, 17 data will be in sometime next year from the Michigan incident crime reporting. But violent crime was down 28% in Grand Blanc Township from 15 to 16, and property crime down 31%. That's an accolade, I think, that the police, that's good news in today's society, right? And then just one last piece of data that I find really an accolade to the police department is they have a statistic that's a clearance rate. So it's if a report was filed, how do you do about closing that file? And if Chief, if I'm saying that wrong, correct me on that. But Grand Blanc Township's at 65%. So you want to say, okay, what is that? Is that good or bad, right? Everybody wants to compare it to something, right? City of Flint is around 17%. City of Grand Blanc 42%, and City of Davison, which is I think the closest one, around 50%. So, if you file a report, and I mean that means that some action was taken, and that report was closed. That's in huge. Law enforcement. That's a big number.
Right.
So, anyway, I just wanted to bring up those. There's a lot of statistics and a lot of things that we review, but those were just the big hitters.
Very good point. Thank you, Mr. Kent.
And Board of Zoning Appeals, I don't see it listed on there, but anyway, that meeting is the third Tuesday of November, before Thanksgiving.
I imagine those meetings are getting busier as the development, and same probably with Planning Commission.
Yeah, I haven't seen the agenda for November, so I can't tell you, but yeah, we've been getting items as much as 6 about a month or 2 ago. 2 months ago, I think it was, and we just had 2 or 3 last time. So
okay, thank you, Mr. Guzak.
Yes, just want to mention on Concord Green, I know they said it was completed, but I just wanted to update the residents that we don't have the bonding funding out there yet because we don't have the final bill, but we are going to the maximum amount that was required with our resolution of $508,000, and that will be divided by 10 years and divided by the 53 residents, and that item, that principal will be placed on their tax bill this year, so it will be coming out. And of course, the first year's worth of interest is free, and we hope to have by the end of the year, final bill, and then, of course, the final bid on it. We don't know the interest rate or anything yet because we don't know the exact dollar amount, but the good news is it's real close to completion, and it will be on their tax bill.
Thank you, Mr. Guzak. Ms. Lane?
I don't have anything to report because we
Okay.
didn't have an election this week.
Okay.
We had people show up.
Right.
Did we really?
Well,
More than 13%?
Oh, did I say
guess
that
it's
loud?
to me then. I'm not sure if we reported already, but we had our Secretary of State was in here doing a press conference. Was it last Friday?
Yes.
And set up here in the room with the voting equipment, and had the media here. And it was nice that Secretary of State chose Grand Blanc Township to highlight the new equipment that's coming out. Couple of things real briefly. I was, just before the board meeting, I was at the Greater Flint Genesee Chamber Awards evening and at the Flint Institute of Arts, and one of our businesses here in Grand Blanc received an award for the top economic development business award, and that was CNX, or Connects Motion on Embry Road. And so I attended that with them. They're real pleased to be here. The 911 consortium hired a new executive director, and you'll probably be reading about her or their background shortly. KWA, I don't know if anybody else is interested in going. There's a few of us going to the open house that they'll be having later this month. Let me know if you do, because I'm going to call them tomorrow with our RSVP. The Pollock Road, we did receive an estimate. I don't know if I mentioned this to you. It came out to 1.1 million. We'll be meeting with the entities, whether it's Genesis and the residents, to figure out how they can pay for that, and we'll be glad to bond for, or to go out for the bond for them. The PGA is having a press conference on Monday at McLaren's headquarters, so apparently McLaren's getting behind the event big time, and they are really planning some neat things that I think will
Awesome.
really set the thing on fire. Well, I shouldn't use that term, I guess, but
That's-
it will very.
Not until we vote on the budget.
Yeah. The Parks and Rec had task force meeting a few days ago, and asked a lot of hard-hitting questions, and we'll be delving into that even further. And then also, just as a teaser, we've been asked to sign a non-disclosure agreement with the state of Michigan for some development that they want to look at Grand Blanc Township for. And I know Mr. Leem and I have met with a couple of entities that are looking at something else even. So I also noticed that houses are starting to be built on the south part of Baldwin Road in the Emerald Lakes subdivision that was stopped development for a while. So I see them pouring basements now, and it looks like
It's good.
it's a pretty good sized development. So hopefully that moves forward. Mr. Limita?
Really, all I would say is, I'll echo what he said about the economic development inquiries. It's been a really busy few weeks. We've had, there's one going on, and they're looking at the Racer Trust property, which is part of General Motors off of Dorrit Highway, some development there. And again, non-disclosure agreements, so we can't announce anything that's going on over there, but there's been quite a bit of interest. And we've also had, I'm just seeing like in the last few weeks, I've had several meetings with people from all over the country who are taking a look at Grand Blanc Township and looking for development opportunities. So hopefully one day soon we get to announce what's coming up next once they clear us to allow us to start naming names. And the planner ad, which is running through November 30th, I currently have 4 candidates who are very quality, so that's great news. Last year, I think when we were going through this process, we had 46 candidates and 3 that I was interested in. This year we have 5 candidates and 4 that I'm interested in, so I think making the adjustment that the board allowed us to do in that salary range went a long ways towards being able to up our game a little bit on those candidates.
Mr. Laddie?
I don't have anything to add.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
I'll support it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
You can stay.
Yeah, they moved the kid to Monday, right?